Chapter 471. Little Match That Sells Girls. F***C. These wretched B***stards are too F***king disgusting. Jintian Wuging Yu. It's more than disgusting, I feel like vomiting. Women eat their rice. Can women only sleep with men when they enter the military camp? Are there no heroines in the history of their side? The expressions of those two were so wretched. Even if they were just fantasizing, I feel disgusted for the girls in the female camp. I can't have fun anymore. Sofa is Xianggu. Yes. It's so disgusting. Streamer, you must not let these people off so easily. I'm waiting for you to slap them in the face. Shuoshu and Little Pudding. I think we can't really blame these men for being wretched. It's normal for them to have perverted thoughts because of the general atmosphere. I went to Baidu to look up some ancient information and found that it's common to bring women to the military camp. They are the so-called camp prostitutes. They usually do odd jobs, and if the war is tense, they'll be pushed to the battlefield. If the war goes well, they'll become prostitutes to serve the male soldiers. Ginseng Kue. Even so, I still feel extremely uncomfortable. The streamer established the female camp to let these women follow the army to war, to build up their careers, to raise their status so that people can no longer look down on them. Before the official start, their comrades were already fantasizing. It was as if they had eaten a fly. Jiang Pingji calmly multitasked. She paid attention to the situation below and looked at the comments on the streaming interface. At that moment she heard Liyun's slightly suppressed and unhappy voice. This matter cannot be dragged on. If we don't explain it clearly, the reputation of the female camp will be ruined. Displeasure flashed in Liyun's eyes. He truly hated those who were irresponsible and liked to joke around with the reputation of women. Such behavior was too lowly. According to the Lord's narration, the female camp would be heroines who would go to the battlefield and kill the enemy. In troubled times, Liyun believed that anyone who dared to stand up and fight could be called a hero. When these wretched people mentioned the female camp, they would think of such things. It was simply disgusting. However, these foolish people didn't feel ashamed but proud. Liyun felt that these people were not worthy of being men. They had no breadth of mind and bearing. They couldn't even be called an upright man. Fame isn't something given by others. You have to earn it with your own hands. Jiang Pingji sneered as she looked at the new recruits. She had a wicked idea. Since they think that there's nothing good in the female battalion, I'll let the female soldiers of the female battalion teach them how to behave. They'll kneel on the ground and swallow their words. She wanted to build a female battalion, so she definitely couldn't get involved in these messy things. Before the enemy could recognize the strength of the female battalion, they had to recognize their own people first. The previous troops had all seen Nongqin's strength, so no one dared to be rude to the female troops. However, these newly recruited soldiers and the Imperial Guards were different. Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes dangerously as she thought of a plan. There was nothing more powerful than a fist to make them submit. So what if she was a woman? She could still beat up these new recruits and make them roll on the ground. After hearing her words, Liyun rummaged through the information on the female troops in his mind. It seemed that none of them could fight. However, if you want to convince people with strength, there doesn't seem to be anyone in the female battalion who can do it. Liyun furrowed his brows. The best way to make these new recruits shut up was to have a fight. However, the leader of the female troops, Jiang Nongqin, who could fight, was not in Xiangyang district. Where could he find a suitable person now? Jiang Pingji said, "There will be one soon." Finishing her sentence, she said to the soldier at the side, "Go to the female battalion and borrow a set of female soldiers' clothes." For the convenience of training, regardless of male or female soldiers, their clothes were extremely loose. Every set of clothes was equipped with many ropes. These ropes were used to tie the cuffs of the sleeves and adjust the size of the clothes. Therefore, even if Jiang Pingji's figure was taller than the average woman, the clothes she brought could still be worn. Looking at the clothes, Liyun suddenly said, "My lord, Yun can't disguise as a woman with this appearance." Jiang Pingji was dumbfounded. What? The audience in the streaming room was the first to react. Immediately they laughed heartily. Bailu Heshabi, I can't take it anymore. I'm dying of laughter. Brother Liyun's imagination is too wild. Does he think the streamer wants him to disguise as a woman to teach those new soldiers a lesson? To be honest, I'm really looking forward to seeing Brother Liyun in female clothing. It'll definitely be a different experience. Which artist will paint a portrait of him in female clothing? Xian Yuan Yuan. Brother Li Yun looks too manly. If he wants muscles, he has muscles. If he wants to be a man, he has the guts of a man. If he wears women's clothes, people will recognize him instantly. However, his facial features are really good. If he were to dress up a little, it's not impossible to look at him in female clothing. Meng Zhu Ling Chong Yuan. If any family's daughter looks like this, it won't do. It's a little hard on the eyes. Jiang Pingji also felt that Li Yun's imagination was a little hard on the eyes. How did he come up with such a conclusion? She almost ridiculed his incompetence. Even if I'm blind, I know you can't look at you in female clothing. Li Yun's face blushed slightly. Only then did he realize that he had misunderstood. His lord did not want him to disguise as a woman. However, if it wasn't him, then who could it be? After looking around, his gaze fell on Jiang Pingji and he asked, "Could it be that my lord wants to disguise as a woman and prepare to enter the arena personally?" Jiang Pingji nodded. "Yes, I'll teach them a lesson. It'll be best if I beat them until their legs turn to jelly at the sight of a woman." After saying that, she revealed a wicked smile. The audience felt a chill in their hearts and had an ominous premonition. Li Yun took a step back and looked carefully. Then he said, This won't do." Jiang Pingji raised her brows and said, "Why won't it do? I can defeat those soft-footed shrimps below with one hand." Li Yun shook his head and said with extreme honesty, "My lord, if such a stalwart man disguises as a woman, I won't look as good as him." The atmosphere suddenly became quiet. In the next second, the bullet screen in the streaming room exploded again. Everyone lined up to mock Jiang Pingji. "Buxiang jiaging Xianxia. Let me tell you a joke. The streamer is a stalwart man. He won't look as good as Li Yun in female clothing. Jintian Inzai jiaging. The streamer who disguises as a man is going to disguise as a woman. Is she a man or a woman?" Zaicai Mengzhu. "Ha, I'm dying of laughter. This streaming room is simply toxic." Shanggu Liang Yao keyboard. "Young brother Li Yun is too honest. Such honest boys usually don't live long." Mingtian jiaging. "Young brother Li Yun, be careful. You've offended the narrow-minded streamer." Jiang Pingji took the female camp uniform and raised her head to look at Li Yun. She chuckled happily. Chapter 472. Jiang Pingji said, "I'm going to change. Keep an eye on the people below. Don't let them cause trouble." Li Yun nodded. He regained his solemn and cold expression. He began to keep an eye on them with a heavy expression. Down below, the new recruit Dian Yan's heart was burning with rage. He stood up for the women in the village. He had no choice but to lead the men in the village to fight against the Tsing-Yi army. In the end, his family was destroyed and he ended up as a bandit. It could be said that he hated the existence of prostitutes in the camp the most among all the new recruits. Such an organization should not exist. The military camp was originally a place for hot-blooded men to build their careers and rest on the battlefield. How could there be such a disgusting deal in the dark? Perhaps Dian Yan's reaction made the two recruits unhappy, as one of them opened his mouth to speak. "Hey, what are your eyes doing? Why are you staring at me like that?" Dian Yan questioned. "Do you know who the so-called prostitutes in the camp are?" The new recruit replied nonchalantly, "Of course they're all indecent women. Do you, a black-faced man, want to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex? It's not that I want to criticize you, but look at how poor and ugly you are. If you were outside, you wouldn't even be able to hold a woman's hand. Now you're here to care about this nonsense." Dian Yan suppressed his anger. His voice deepened. Many of the prostitutes in the camp are innocent women and children. They were captured by force. The new recruit was unhappy. He straightened his neck and retorted. "What's wrong with you, you blockhead? Are you deliberately looking for trouble? I don't care how those women came here. Whether they were captured or kidnapped, it has nothing to do with me." The new recruit stood up. His voice suddenly became louder. It attracted the attention of others. He continued, "If you can control yourself, don't go there to seek pleasure. Just mind your own business. Do you think you're a saint?" Another recruit nearby opened his mouth and said to Dian Yan, "The girls in the women's camp were not captured, nor were they snatched. They came willingly after the district headquarters issued an announcement. They volunteered to serve men in the military camp. Brother, don't bother too much. The district magistrate sympathizes with us and feels that we have worked hard, so he specially prepared those delicate girls for us. Just enjoy quietly and don't deliberately cause trouble. Originally, Dian Yen still had some hope, but now he had completely given up. Why would Xiangyang district, which appeared bright and beautiful on the surface, brazenly set up a brothel? One of the recruits laughed. That's right, don't stir up trouble. Otherwise you'll be in for a treat. With the brothel we can go and have some fun even if we're bored. Look at you, I'm afraid you're still a virgin. When the time comes, we brothers will bring you to experience it. You will understand the taste of a woman in the future. The recruits did not even notice the conflicted expression on the sergeant in charge of their training. The new recruit was really bold. He actually said that the women's camp was a brothel camp? It's a pity that Maiden Jiang isn't here. Otherwise she could teach these kids a lesson. According to the higher-ups, Lady Jiang will bring the troops from Hejian County to meet up. They should leave after the new year. If everything goes well, they can arrive in about a month. The troops used to look down on women, but now they dared not do so, especially the female troops. They did not dare to provoke them. Otherwise they would end their family line in minutes. Their attacks were sinister and their methods were shocking. To be honest, if not for training, they all thought they would be hacked to death by the other party. Once a man was touched by those women, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Kicking the crotch, stabbing the eye, striking the throat, breaking the bone, bending the finger, kicking the ankle, stabbing the heart. Not only were their moves sinister, but they were also so fast that there was no time to block. To be honest, even these well-trained men did not dare to be so dirty. These people probably did not expect that the women's camp would be even more slippery in the future. They're still too young, sigh. The sergeant sighed softly. His eyes were filled with the expression of watching a good show. He never expected that there would still be female soldiers who could teach these new recruits how to behave without Jiang Nongqin around. Dian Yan's heart was filled with anger and disappointment. His rough face carried a strong sense of hostility. The new recruits thought that Dian Yan wanted to fight with them. One by one they could not help but stand up and shrink into the crowd. After all, Dian Yan was too tall. He had a natural advantage over them. What do you want? If you dare to cause trouble here, be careful of being thrown out. Dian Yan laughed coldly. Just as he was about to say that he did not care about staying there, a clear voice came from behind him. Which little bastard is spouting nonsense here, saying that the women's camp is a brothel camp? All of you stand out. Dian Yan turned his head in search of the voice. He saw a tall and well-proportioned girl standing not far away. She held a wooden spear in her hand and a cold and disdainful smile hung on her fair face. She looked at them coldly. She did not come with good intentions. Dian Yan immediately sensed the hostility from her and subconsciously took a step back. The others did not notice. Instead, they curiously craned their necks to look at the female soldiers from the women's camp. Li Yun had been paying attention to the situation. When he saw Jiang Pingji appear, he almost spat. Could it be that his lord's so-called cross-dressing was just a change of clothes and a clean woman's hair? Was she applying makeup on her eyebrows and lips? Did she come out with her face bare? What about the flesh on her chest? Where were they? Li Yun secretly glanced at his lord's chest. It was flat. However, if his lord changed into women's clothes and tied up her hair in a slightly feminine bun, it would really be a little interesting. At least if someone was a little blind, they might mistakenly think that his lord was a woman. Li Yun commented from the side, waiting for his lord to sweep the new recruits. Oh, this is a young lady. Seeing Jiang Pingji's attitude, some of the new recruits were terrified. However, there were always some who were extremely daring and insisted that the women's camp was a brothel camp. There was no need to respect the women in the brothel camp. Anyway, they lay on the bed and served men. Even though Jiang Pingji's aura was extraordinary, not only were they not afraid, they had indescribable thoughts. All right. Maiden insists that the women's camp is not a brothel camp. Then let's change the name. What do you think? Jiang Pingji curled her lips. Under the control of her nimble fingers, she spun the wooden spear in her hand. Nothing. As soon as she finished speaking, the wooden spearhead under her control slapped the other party across the face. You bitch, how can you hit me? Her attack was too sudden and the recruit was caught off guard. He raised his hand to wipe his mouth and blood came out. He licked his teeth with his tongue. They were a little loose. Jiang Pingji smiled gently, but she said, "Not only am I going to beat you, I'm going to beat you until you can't get up." It had always been Jiang Pingji's style to start a fight at the slightest disagreement. She would not wait for the other party to get into position before making a move. The wooden spear in her hand was as dexterous as her own arm. Wherever she pointed, the spear's shadow would almost turn into a shadow. The recruit was only stunned for a moment before he was hit a few times. He rolled on the ground in pain. After fighting for a while, Jiang Pingji said to the others, "Who thinks that the women's camp is a brothel camp?" A few of the recruits saw that she was so arrogant and couldn't help but get angry. "Isn't it? It was originally a brothel camp." Chapter 473. The recruits were also hooligans. Their skin was as thick as the city wall and they were not stingy at all. When they heard Jiang Pingji ask if they needed to be F***ked, a few of them whistled frivolously and presumptuously. "Ha! Did you hear that? This little girl asked if I needed to be F***ked." The recruit laughed arrogantly and his mouth was full of dirty words. He stared at Jiang Pingji's face and body with a pair of sneaky eyes. He opened his chest and said, "I need to be F***ked. Little girl, do you want to F***ck me here?" The streamer was flirted with. The audience in the streaming room was so angry that they wanted to smash their keyboards. "Tumi Dalao, F***c, this damn hooligan dares to fantasize about my streamer. I'll beat him to death with my shoehorn. Zuxiozio, where are the 150,000 live streaming brothers? Follow me and drown this idiot with your spit." Jinri Wuging, I can't stand it. The streamer is my goddess. Where did this idiot come from? How dare he flirt with my goddess? If I don't cut off his descendant, he won't know how powerful I am. Streamer, don't be afraid. Hit him in the face. If he dies, I'll take responsibility. Compared to the audience's agitated emotions, Jiang Pingji did not react. Her expression was still cold, but her eyes were a little dangerous. She said, Then you have to hold on. Don't say no halfway." After she finished speaking, the wooden spear in her hand rushed forward like lightning. The body of the spear moved in an arc and slid past the corner of the opponent's eye. Pa! The spear bounced back and swept across. Before the opponent could react, the left side of his face was already swollen. Block, grab, slide, pick, twist. The dense shadows of the spear blocked all the opponent's escape routes. She was brave and vigorous, and the continuous attacks hit the opponent's body like a drizzle. In a short while his head was swollen several times. The opponent could only hold his head with both hands and beg for mercy. Jiang Pingji's wooden spear swept and flicked, and the body fell backward like a kite with a broken string. He rolled in a circle and was dizzy. In the end he ate a mouthful of fine sand and gravel. 2 new recruits were knocked to the ground by Jiang Pingji. The audience already had the intention to retreat. They secretly regretted their cheap mouths. Jiang Pingji laughed and mocked. "Tiski, are there only a few pieces of trash in the new recruit camp?" She rarely showed her anger on her face, but that didn't mean she wasn't angry. She was just thinking about how to take revenge. In some ways she was no narrower than the point of a needle. "Bitch, who are you calling trash?" The other recruits were also fired at and they were furious. The angry recruits basically agreed that the women's camp was a brothel camp. A few recruits hid at the edge, far away from the battle so as not to get caught up in it. Dian Yan's eyes brightened. Jiang Pingji's posture of easily defeating the 2 new recruits amazed him. His favorable impression of her skyrocketed. "Why don't you go outside and ask if the women's camp is a brothel camp? You said it's a brothel and you even gave me face. Don't be so shameless." "That's right. War has always been a matter for men. Do you really think that by joining the women's camp you're really helping others fight? What a joke. Either you obediently stay here and serve men, or you obediently go home and serve men. Do you really think that by playing with a gun you can go to the battlefield in the future? Don't worry, we brothers will take care of your business in the future. We'll let you understand what a women's camp is." Jiang Pingji acted as if she didn't hear him. She used the tip of her foot to push the recruit's head away, revealing a swollen and bruised pig face. She said sarcastically, "Didn't you say that you're quite durable? You can't take it anymore?" The recruit felt pain all over his body. He couldn't even get up. He felt extremely humiliated. Jiang Pingji raised her face coldly. She said, "In a place like the battlefield there are only the living and the dead. I've never heard of men and women. You weaklings, you don't even have 2 tails of meat and you still want to go to the battlefield to kill the enemy? Why don't we change the new recruit camp to a female camp? You don't need to huff and puff and crawl to the battlefield. Just obediently lie on the bed and properly serve your brothers and sisters. It'll save you trouble, worry, and effort. What do you think of this suggestion? Damn it. Liyun almost choked on his own saliva. The audience in the streaming room cheered and jumped in joy. Streamer, your ability to shoot the map has improved to the next level. When a few sergeants saw this, they wanted to step forward and stop her, but Liyun stopped them. Don't go up, just continue watching. What a joke. Their lord seemed to be having a good time. If someone were to go up and disturb her, wouldn't that be looking for trouble? The sergeants looked at them worriedly. Their hearts were filled with worry. Brother Liyun, if we don't do anything, will they cause trouble? The higher-ups had given them the job of teaching the recruits. This was a great trust. They all wanted to do their best. According to the words of Chief Instructor Meng Hun, if they taught the recruits well, not only would they be promoted, but they would also be freed from their slave status. Moreover, they would maintain the troop structure and their original treatment would not change. Such a good thing, all the sergeants almost broke their heads fighting for it. The other rewards were secondary. Being freed from their slave status was the most attractive. As their lord's troops, they enjoyed very good treatment. Everyone wished they could sacrifice their lives for their lord. However, troops were also a type of domestic slave. They were registered as slaves. In the future, when they got married, their descendants would also be registered as slaves. They didn't have to think for themselves, but they had to think for their future generations. Hearing such a good thing, which troop wouldn't be moved? After a fierce internal competition, they stood out as the cream of the crop. They suffered the envy and jealousy of their comrades. They treasured this opportunity very much. One by one, they trained the recruits with the strictest attitude, training them to the point of death. Seeing that the results were good, something like this had to happen at this critical juncture. Seeing the worried expressions of the sergeants, Liyun's cold expression softened slightly. There was a hint of warmth in it. Don't worry. That female soldier was my lord disguised as a woman. Her purpose was to teach these fellows a lesson. Li Yun's words revealed the secret of the heavens. The few corporals and instructors were stunned speechless. That arrogant female soldier was actually my lord disguised as a woman? Needless to say, when my lord dressed as a woman, she did look a little valiant and heroic. The way she beat them up just now was also very straightforward. Li Yun said, "Let's just wait and see the show." The sergeants' hearts relaxed. Suddenly they were overjoyed. There was even a hint of schadenfreude. We'll listen to Brother Li Yun and watch the show from the side. Their lord had worked hard to facilitate the construction of the female troop. Now she was creating a female battalion. It was obvious how determined his lord was. But now there were people who didn't have eyes and were rushing to make trouble for his lord. They were disagreeing with him. Chapter 474. The recruits were mocked by Jiang Pingji. They were so angry that their faces turned green. They raised their hands to grab her and beat her to death. Jiang Pingji's lips curled into a joyful smile. She moved her feet and dodged sideways. Her right hand pinched the vital part of the opponent's wrist. She suddenly pulled it down and kneed him. The man cried out in pain. Jiang Pingji moved her body and kicked him into the crowd. He knocked into a few new soldiers along the way. The wooden spear in her hand slid nimbly. She dodged sideways and lightly struck a person's wrist, sweeping across the area. The body of the wooden spear bounced off the swarming enemies. It was obviously a light wooden spear, but when it landed on them, it was as if they were hit by a heavy boulder. Their bodies involuntarily tilted backward and they lost their center of gravity. The wooden spear bounced back along with the force. Jiang Pingji continuously struck with her spear. She struck several people's lower back with lightning speed. Their muscles were temporarily paralyzed and they could not stand up. It was as if she had eyes on her back. She agilely dodged the sneak attack from behind. She slid her spear and swept across her back. Pop, pop. Almost all of them hit their faces, leaving a thick red mark. A recruit shouted in the chaos, "Stop the wooden spear in this woman's hand." Yes, without the weapon in her hand, could she ascend to the heavens? Hearing this, Li Yun could not help but cover his face with his hands. He was not the one who said that even if she wanted to die, she should not do so. Li Yun was very clear about his Longjuan's spear technique. She even learned some of her techniques from him. Therefore, Li Yun was very clear that his Langjun had never learned spear techniques before. At most, she only knew a little. She only relied on her battle instincts to use the weapon in her hand. Whether it was a spear or a halberd, to her it was just a weapon. It was a medium used to hurt people. In essence, there was no difference. Simply put, the wooden spear restricted the development of her strength. Without the wooden spear, these new soldiers would only kneel down even more decisively. This was because his lord was born with divine strength. Her strength could lift a cauldron and chase a tiger across a ravine. Did they really think that masters wielded weapons to increase their strength? It could be self-sealing. The recruits rushed towards Jiang Pingji's wooden spear. She simply abandoned it and fought with her bare hands. Li Yun raised his hand and pinched the space between his brows. He turned his body to the side and avoided the battle. He could not bear to watch. The battle was completely one-sided. The sergeants seemed to have returned to their youth. They were once fortunate enough to be abused by their lord like this, and their hearts were filled with sorrow. Ugh! A fist smashed into his nose, producing a dull thud. The bridge of his nose slanted to one side, and 2 streams of blood flowed out of his nostrils. Jiang Pingji grabbed his collar with one hand and his belt with the other. She easily lifted him up and threw him into the crowd. If I don't show them what I'm made of, these recruits will still want to overturn the heavens. Bang! Bang bang. Apart from the muffled sounds of fists and kicks hitting flesh, the recruits' wails and groans were endless. Madam, please spare me. I won't dare to do it again. Please spare my life, madam. I will never say that the women's camp is a brothel again. I won't say it even if you beat me to death. Please spare my life. Ooh, don't hit me anymore. Great aunt, I'm calling you great grandmother. I won't hit you anymore. Woo woo woo, I'm blind. I shouldn't have said such nonsense. Madam, just treat me as a fart and let me go. They felt pain after being beaten up. One by one they cried and begged for mercy. But what was the use of begging for mercy now? If begging for mercy worked, why would she still need her fists? What did you say just now that you shouldn't have? Swallow it all back now. Jiang Pingji smiled coldly and said, with your abilities, you still want to touch the women's camp? When you're on the battlefield, can you still straighten your legs and charge forward? I repeat, there are only the dead and the living on the battlefield. There are no men or women. The women's camp can still make contributions and fight on the battlefield. What about you? When the wind blows, you're like a dog. When the wind blows, you betray your comrades. Your legs run faster than anyone else. At this time, your backbone, your arrogance, and your courage to talk nonsense here have all been fed to the dogs. The recruits were in so much pain that they cried. They lay on the ground and could not get up. They had no idea how Jiang Pingji beat them up. Wherever she hit, it was as if they were paralyzed. Jiang Pingji, a girl, had practically challenged the entire recruit camp. A group of men had lost their dignity to their ancestors. Jiang Pingji clicked her tongue and did not look at the recruits. She turned to the sergeants and said, "Did you all see it?" The sergeants tensed up and quickly straightened their bodies, their backs as straight as a pen. They answered in unison, "We all saw it clearly." Jiang Pingji's face was solemn and her eyes were sharp. I think these people not only lack grasp but they also lack training. I think the training in the recruit camp is still too little. That's why they have so much free time and energy to gossip everywhere. In the future, all the training should be increased accordingly. Train them until they can't get up anymore. After everyone heard that, they felt their scalps go numb. Was the current training not heavy enough? The recruits who were knocked down secretly panicked. They thought of finding a chance to escape in the future. Jiang Pingji continued, "If there are any deserters without a reason, they will be dealt with as deserters according to the camp rules." The internal rules of the military camp she had established were very strict. Jiang Pingji understood the importance of obedience to orders and prohibitions for the soldiers. She was even more clear that nothing could be accomplished without rules. Even if the soldiers were illiterate, they were required to memorize a few camp rules. During the assessment, they had to memorize them fluently. There were not many camp rules. One of them was dealing with deserters. Kill without mercy. Jiang Pingji smiled coldly and said, "Don't think that you'll be fine just because you escaped. You can escape, but you can't escape the temple." These new soldiers were all recruited from Xiangyang district. Their roots were here, so they really couldn't escape to anywhere else. She was about to look for the wooden spear when she saw a tall and strong man with a dark face return the wooden spear. Jiang Pingji asked, "What's your name?" Dian Yen answered, "Dian Yen." It was good enough for a child from a poor family to have a decent name. Something as elegant as a courtesy name was basically non-existent. Jiang Pingji kept the wooden spear and said to him, "Dian Yan? I remember this name." She asked a few sergeants to clean up the new recruit camp. She kept a sullen face as usual. It was not enough to just beat up the new recruit camp. She had to officially announce the news to clear up the rumors and misunderstandings about the female camp. Thinking about it, she missed Jiang Nongqing more. If she was the commander of the female camp, there would not be so much trouble. Jiang Pingji went to change out of the clothes of the female camp and changed back into men's attire. Then she opened the streaming room. "Chizai Yuduo, streamer, from today onwards you're my goddess. You look so handsome even when you're dirty." Chapter 475. My Lord. Li Yun caught up with her from behind, his face filled with apprehension. Jiang Pingji said, "That Dian Yan is not bad. When this phase of training in the new recruit camp is over, transfer him to my side." Transfer him to the Lord's side? Is she intending to nurture Dian Yan? Li Yun was astonished, but he said, "Yes, my lord." "Why are you following me?" Jiang Pingji took 2 steps, but Li Yun was still following her. She turned her head and asked him, "Are there no more training in the new recruit camp?" Li Yun looked embarrassed and asked Jiang Pingji cautiously, "My lord, the new recruits are injured to this extent. Are we still going to continue training today?" One by one they lay on the ground crying out in pain. They looked very pathetic. Li Yun was a kind child, so he wondered if he should give the new recruits half a day to recuperate. After all, the training in winter was very heavy. Without a healthy body and sufficient rest, they would not be able to persevere to the end. Jiang Pingji snorted coldly and said, "Your lord knows when to stop. Otherwise, there would be hundreds of corpses lying on the ground. How could I let them whimper and wail? The injuries on their bodies only look scary. In reality, other than some pain, there are no other problems. They won't die." What a joke. If Jiang Pingji really went all out, the small bodies of these newbies would not be enough for her to tear them apart. Hearing this, Li Yun felt more at ease. What happened in the new recruit camp was quickly spread to the government office. Su Ku and Qiguan Rang revealed a curious expression. Su Ku even pinched his chin and touched the short beard that he had just grown. He smiled and chatted with others, saying, "I wonder what my lord looks like when she dresses as a girl?" Meng Hun happened to come to the government office to retrieve the bamboo scroll. Hearing Su Ku's words, his mind involuntarily pictured Jiang Pingji dressed as a girl, drawing her eyebrows and lips. She pitifully blinked her big watery eyes, spoke softly and walked in small quick steps. "Oh my God!" Meng Hun almost shivered in fear. Qiguan Rang snorted and took out a small plate of fried and salted peanuts from the table. His words were harsh. "With lord's looks, even if she's dressed like a fairy, men would probably be scared out of their wits when they see her face. They wouldn't have any romantic thoughts. Why do you have to take things so hard?" The eyes were innocent. What had they done wrong? Why did they have to hurt them? Su Ku leaned over and stretched out his hand. He touched a handful of Qiguan Rang's peanuts and put them in his mouth. They tasted good. "That's true. My lord's face. I really can't think of anything." Su Ku and Qiguan Rang joined hands to ridicule Jiang Pingji. They did not realize that Feng Jin and Wei Xi had remained silent. Of course, even if they realized this, they probably would not care, because Feng Jin and Wei Xi indeed did not look like people who would ridicule their masters. They were both gentlemen. A gentleman does not speak ill of others behind their backs. There is nothing wrong with that. Silently, Feng Jin and Wei Xi looked at each other, then quickly moved away. They were all suspicious of each other's reactions. Could it be that Zixiao Huayu knew something? "What's with your expressions?" It was rare for Jiang Pingji to come back to the government office. She realized that Su Ku and Qiguan Rang's expressions were a little strange. "I heard that my lord wiped out the recruit camp?" Qiguan Rang asked with a smile. Jiang Pingji rolled her eyes. She knew why these people were secretly laughing. She admitted it openly. "Yes, your lord even changed into the uniform of the female camp and picked out all those little bastards." Qiguan Rang held back his laughter and bowed with his hands folded in front of him. "My lord is heroic." Jiang Pingji snorted. Qiguan Rang's acting skills could fool others, but it definitely could not fool her eyes. She glanced at Qiguan Rang and Su Ku and sat at the head of the table. Don't you want to see your lord dress up as a woman? Qiguanrang raised his eyebrows. He had a bad premonition in his heart, but he said honestly, of course I do. Jiang Pingji supported her cheek with one hand and tapped on the table with the other. She was rather bored. She said, it's almost the new year. Anyway, you don't have to go back to reunite with your families. Why don't you just gather in the government office and celebrate the new year together? Instead of enjoying the festivities of the new year, why not play a game? Everyone will dress up. The men will dress up as women and the women will dress up as men. How about that? Qiguanrang was silent for a moment. His lord was really bored to death. Nanshan Daiwanling, I'm impressed by the streamer. How can you be so quick-witted? Zizai Xiaoyao, the streamer who dresses up as a man, suggested that everyone dress up. Streamer, you won't lose out on this deal. Chanel, dress up. I'm looking forward to Beauty CI dressing up as a woman. He'll definitely look like a fairy. Even though he knew that Jiang Pingji was only joking, Qiguanrang still had to explain lest she really did it. Pinching his carefully grown beard, Qiguanrang laughed at himself. My lord's suggestion is interesting. However, in order not to frighten the gods and Buddhas and disperse the luck of the coming year, this plan should be put on hold for the time being. Look at this face. Even if I put on makeup and change into a woman's uniform, I still don't look like a woman. Jiang Pingji curled her lips and shook her head with a smile. She turned to ask Feng Jin. Chapter 476. Waves of tempting meaty fragrance seeped through the outer layer of leaves and spread out, lingering at the tip of one's nose, making one salivate. The eateries are starting to close today. I knew you wouldn't be able to find a place to eat today. Wei Xi lit a few charcoal braziers and waited until the temperature in the room rose slightly before he took off the thick fur cloak covering his body. I wonder when the restaurant will open. Zhang Ping asked as he ate, completely disregarding the rule of not speaking while eating. It should be the 5th day of the new year. Wei Xi did not know the exact date. This was just his guess. The government office closed 2 days in advance for a total of 7 days. Calculating the time, the restaurants outside might open on the 5th day of the new year. During this period of time, Zhang Ping had nowhere to buy food. Tomorrow I will go to the broker house to buy an old maid who can cook and do laundry. Zhang Ping had said that he was going to buy it last time, but he still hadn't gone. There was some hesitation in Wei Xi's expression. Even Zhang Ping, who was a little slow on the uptake, could sense his abnormality. Zixiao, if there's anything you want to say to me, just say it. There's no need to beat around the bush. Wei Xi sighed. Has Shiheng ever thought of staying in Xiangyang district? Zhang Ping frowned. He was not stupid and naturally understood that Wei Xi was trying to recruit him on behalf of his lord. Zixiao, you know Ping's personality very well. He can't stand those government affairs. If I were to stay in the government office all day like you and deal with a bunch of vulgar people, I wouldn't be able to stand it. Zhang Ping's words were already a rejection. Some people, such as Wei Xi, wanted to pacify the 9 prefectures and the 4 seas and restore peace and tranquility to the world. Some people, on the other hand, would muddle along. No matter how chaotic the outside world was, they only liked to indulge in their own world, such as Zhang Ping. Everyone had their own aspirations and they could not be forced. Wei Xi revealed a faint smile. Our current lord's personality might be just what Shiheng wants. Zhang Ping raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Shiheng used to study all kinds of siege and defensive equipment. Coincidentally, the lord is also a kindred spirit. Wei Xi's voice was neither fast nor slow. He was not the least bit worried that Zhang Ping would not be tempted. For someone like Zhang Ping, there was no other lord who could be more compatible with him than Jiang Pingji. Wei Xi understood her. She was not best at fighting a war or shooting her mouth off. Instead, she was best at using people. Taking Zhang Ping as an example, he was not very good at government affairs, but he was obsessed with mechanisms and objects. He was quite talented in designing and manufacturing. Therefore, it was impossible for Jiang Pingji to let Zhang Ping have too much contact with government affairs. The biggest possibility was to throw him into the woodworking workshop and set up a similar department to specialize in this area. Then she would squeeze him dry. However, not only would the passionate Zhang Ping not complain, he would even be happy to be squeezed dry. It was a typical case of being sold and still paying for the other party. Zhang Ping would not be convinced so easily. After all, no one knew how much exaggeration was mixed in his words. Let me show you something. It won't be too late for Shiheng to make a decision after you see it. After saying that, Wuxia took out a roll of bamboo paper from his sleeve. This roll of bamboo paper was not cut. It was very large, and after slowly unfolding, it was filled with strange charcoal drawings. Outsiders would not be able to understand it, but as a Mahist scholar, Zhang Ping was extremely sensitive to it. He almost pounced forward to snatch it. Zhang Ping carefully looked at the design of the crossbow bed. After looking at it for a while, his eyes became brighter and brighter. He suppressed the excitement in his voice and asked, "Who drew this?" "My lord drew it herself." She was curious about the Mahist family. However, due to her family heritage, she still studied Confucianism. Zhang Ping was fascinated by it. After a while, he sighed regretfully. What a pity. It was a pity that a good seedling of the Mahist family entered Confucianism in vain. What was even more pitiful was that with Jiang Pingji's current status, it was impossible for her to study in peace. It was a waste of such good talent and spiritual energy. The corners of Wei Xi's lips curled up a few degrees. He asked him gently, "Did Shiheng agree?" Zhang Ping wanted to roll his eyes and said indignantly, "This trip is really a big loss." If he had known that there was such a trap waiting for him, Zhang Ping would not have followed Wei Xi north no matter what. Wei Xi's expression was pure and kind, but his tone was awkward. There are many more complicated blueprints of machinery in the Lord's study. The one in your hand was only brought out after I spoke to the Lord in a friendly manner. If Shiheng is curious about the other blueprints, I can't help you even if I want to. In fact, Wei Xi only asked Jiang Pingji if she had anything that could lure the Mahist family, and she threw it at him. Zhang Ping was angry and said angrily, "Wei Xiao, you're also a black-hearted person." In order to attract people to join them, he even used such a shameless method. Did he not know that he was the most vulnerable to temptation? The smile on Wei Xi's face did not change. In fact, it was even more radiant. "My lord is going to hold a New Year's banquet. Do you want to go together?" Zhang Ping was still a little depressed at this moment. He opened his mouth and said, "No." Wei Xi said, "There's no rice stored at home." "Are you planning to drink the northwest wind until the restaurant opens on the 5th day of the new year?" Zhang Ping was speechless. This time he was really speechless. Speaking of this, he suddenly thought of something. How did Wei Xi solve his personal food problem during this period of time? Zhang Ping's mouth opened wide and he asked this question. Wei Xi answered, "There's a special small kitchen in the government office. The food on weekdays is not bad." Especially after Wei Xi came, everyone's standard of living rose rapidly. Even Qiguan Rang and the others complained that they had benefited from Wei Xi. Because Wei Xi was a patient, he needed to take good care of his body. Naturally, his food had to be exquisite and nutritionally balanced. Jiang Pingji learned from the audience in the streaming room and applied what she had learned. She went to make a pot and other cutlery. She taught the chef how to use oil to stir-fry and how to add seasonings to make the food more delicious. Only then did the audience in the streaming room know that the food in the streamer's world was so backward. The food in this era was simply cooked. How could this be tolerated? The seasonings were at most salt and pepper. There wasn't even a pot for stir-frying, let alone stir-frying. Many foods were directly boiled in hot water. For example, boiling cabbage in hot water and adding a little salt. Such bland and tasteless food. It was winter now. There was no cabbage at all. Not to mention steaming, stir-frying, deep-frying, roasting, sautéing, braising, stewing, deep-frying, simmering, mixing. As for the 8 major cuisines described by the audience in the streaming room, it was even more impossible to count on them. Even if Jiang Pingji did not focus on the enjoyment of the tongue, after a long time, she became a little gluttonous from the teasing of the audience in the streaming room. Therefore, it was understandable that Wei Xi had put on a little weight during this period of time. For example, the braised chicken drumstick that Wei Xi had secretly brought back that day was the result of Jiang Pingji's experiments with the chef several times. They wasted a lot of ingredients and seasonings to make it. Such a braised chicken already made Feng Jin not want to go home. Even so, the audience in the streaming room was still picky. They felt that she ate too hard. Kneeling down to call her father, "Sigh, poor streamer. I really want to order a cross-dimensional takeaway so that you can broaden your horizons." Sishijing, "Hey, yellow chicken manor? Why isn't the braised chicken and rice I ordered here yet? Chapter 477. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. The people of Xiangyang district had returned home to reunite with their families. The recruits of the recruit camp had their morning training as usual and were dismissed after noon. They had half a day off to celebrate the festival with their families. Luo Yue, Meng Hun, Li Yun, and the rest gathered in the main hall of the district headquarters, preparing to celebrate the festival with Jiang Pingji. The 8-month-old Chongqing was already quite sturdy. She smiled at everyone she saw, revealing her bright red gums and white teeth. Since the first time she pestered Feng Jin and was brought to the government office by him, Chongqing came over a few times. The weather was cold. She wore 2 sweaters that Wei Jingxian knitted and 2 dresses with fur lining. Finally, she put on a thick hooded cloak. From afar she looked like a chubby ball. Chongqing was very restless. He wanted to pounce on someone she knew. If Feng Jin did not hold her firmly, the girl would definitely cause a ruckus. Happy New Year. Jiang Pingji heard Chongqing's voice and came out to welcome her. Feng Jin could not help but smile bitterly. As a father, his position in his daughter's heart was not as high as his lord. He was not as likable as his lord. As a minister, he was not as important as his daughter in the lord's heart. Anyway, he would not be narcissistic and think that Jiang Pingji came out to welcome him. Jiang Pingji took Chongqing, who was writhing restlessly, and weighed her. Chongqing has become stronger. Once in her arms, Chongqing immediately quieted down. She blinked her eyes obediently and looked innocent. She is used to pretending to be obedient in front of others. Feng Jin held Wei Jingxian's hand with his other hand and said, "It's windy outside. Let's go inside." It was freezing outside and the wind and snow were blowing. Charcoal pots were burning in the 4 corners of the hall. Warm air blew into their faces. Taking off the cloak to ward off the cold, Feng Jin found a seat and sat down. Wei Jingxian sat next to him. Not long after, everyone arrived one after another. Jiang Pingji let Chongqing sit next to her and clapped her hands to signal the servants to serve the meal for the night. It was winter and the ingredients were limited. However, it was the first New Year's banquet after all. Jiang Pingji did not want to make it too shabby. After earnestly asking the audience in the streaming room for advice, Jiang Pingji sorted out the available game ingredients and tried to make the New Year's banquet as rich as possible. If it was in the past, the meat would be boiled in the hot soup after removing the stench, then it would be sliced and served on a plate. She guaranteed that after tonight's banquet, everyone would gain 2 to 3 kilograms. Because it was a separate meal, the portion of each dish was not much, only enough for one person to eat 4 or 5 mouthfuls. Zhang Ping was tricked by Wei Ci to come over. He looked left and right but did not see any singing or dancing. He immediately felt a little dispirited. Now that he heard her say to serve the dishes directly, images of various kinds of cooked meat appeared in his mind, and his mouth felt greasy. However, when the plates of delicious food were served on the table, it made his mouth water. He immediately complained, "Why are the plates so small? Why are there so few dishes on the plates?" He glanced sideways and realized that the dishes on Wei Ci's side were basically untouched. He felt even more aggrieved. He had not eaten enough. Wei Ci's taste was light, but Zhang Ping's was the complete opposite of his. Noticing his friend's resentful gaze, Wei Ci pursed his lips and secretly moved the dishes that he had not touched to the table. "Don't eat too much. There's more to come." He lowered his voice and smiled gently. Zhang Ping secretly glanced at the young man on the main seat and muttered, "Is there no singing and dancing to liven things up?" Wei Ci blinked and asked, "Are you going to dance?" The district headquarters does not keep singers and dancers. You can't watch it even if you want to. Zhang Ping was speechless. Why did he feel that Wei Ci was getting more and more annoying? "Don't watch it then. It's boring anyway," he said. "The lord you chose is a gentle person." At that moment, Jiang Pingji was helplessly soaking a piece of mapo tofu in hot water to dilute the spiciness. She then crushed it on a soup spoon and brought it to the noisy Chongqing's mouth. The little girl opened her mouth and slurped with satisfaction. She smacked her lips and looked at Jiang Pingji with a burning gaze. She still wanted to eat. An 8-month-old child was naturally noisy, but the lord treated her patiently and coaxed her meticulously. She had been taking care of the child and had not even touched her chopsticks. Wuxia was stunned for a moment. He looked up at Jiang Pingji on the main seat and looked a little absent-minded. She has always been very patient with children. When Chongqing was half full, Jiang Pingji began to eat. On the other side, Wei Jingxian was also amazed. Her daughter had to be coaxed every day before she was willing to eat. Feng Jin also felt that this was too spoiling of the child. He tried to use a tough attitude, but it had little effect. It was rare for Chongqing to sit obediently and wait to be fed. He always felt that he had given birth to a fake daughter. Feng Jin knew his daughter and said with a smile, "She's not obedient. She's obviously afraid." In front of Qiguan Rang and the others, she acted coquettishly and cute. In front of Meng Hun and the others, she was obedient and docile. At first he did not understand. Later, Jiang Pingji revealed the secret. A child's intuition was sharper than that of an adult. Luo Yue and the others had the smell of blood on them. They were so afraid that they did not dare to fool around. Jiang Pingji was somewhat full. She asked the crowd, "Is anyone willing to add to the fun?" There were no singers and dancers, but they could watch their subordinates show off their talents. Everyone's faces stiffened and they secretly smiled bitterly. So they were waiting there. Chongqing giggled as if she was making a fuss. In terms of talents, except for Chongqing, everyone present was multi-talented. Even a martial artist like Meng Hun could perform a sword dance to show off his martial arts. It could barely be considered a performance. Feng Jin and the others were even more proficient in the four arts. They would never have stage fright. Xiangyang district was joyous and harmonious. The people seemed to have walked out of the dark clouds of the earthquake. They celebrated the new year and looked forward to the future. Far away in Hejian County, the troops celebrated the new year in the same way. It was a habit in the past, but this year it was somewhat tense. The source of everything was the prominent Zhang family in Hejian. Jiang Nongqin was originally arranging various matters for the New Year's banquet when she heard that the servants of the Lus had come to invite them. She raised her eyebrows and was secretly annoyed. The second lady sat on the main seat and said sarcastically, "Your manners young lady is missing. Instead of looking for her in the manor, you come to the second branch of the Lus to make trouble. Are you sure that my husband is not at home and you think that a group of women are easy to bully? It's the New Year's banquet today. Don't make it difficult for anyone." Madame Hu also came out to watch the show. She looked coldly at Zhang Zhaoshi opposite her. Zhang Zhaoshi was the legal wife of the Zhang family. She was dressed luxuriously and her makeup was elegant and graceful. She did not care about the second lady's words at all. There was a mean look in the corners of her eyes. She obviously came to ask for help, but she put on the posture of a protagonist. "I've looked for her again and again. That little B***th is hiding in the Lu residence. If you don't hand her over today, this matter will not end. Kiske, then you won't end it. However, the Lu residence is small. I'm afraid there's no place for Madame Zhang to stay." The second lady leaned on the table and did not take Zhang Zhaoshi seriously at all. Madame Hu covered her mouth with her sleeve to hide the gloating smile on her face. At this moment, Jiang Nongqin came over and bowed respectfully to greet her. The second lady asked, "Madame Zhang said that their young lady is hiding in our residence. Is that true?" Jiang Nongqin said expressionlessly, "No." Chapter 478. The second lady admired her armor, her eyes filled with disdain. "Mrs. Zhang, you've heard it. The Lu residence doesn't have the person you want. If you continue to be unreasonable and bully the second branch of the Lu residence, there will be no end to this. The Zhang family is considered a distinguished family. As for you, who do you think you are?" The second lady's words angered Mrs. Zhang so much that her face turned green. She glared at the second lady as if her eyes could spit venom. She took a deep breath and secretly clenched her fists. Her long fingernails dug into the flesh of her palms, and there was a sinister smile on her face. "Mrs. Meng, what do you mean? The person ran to your residence. You were the ones who abducted the young madam of the Zhang residence. Even if Lu Zhongqing was here, he would have to give us an explanation, much less your master." Mrs. Zhang mocked Gu Zhen in a strange tone. She purposely emphasized the word Mrs. Meng. Everyone in Hejian County knew about the second lady, Gu Zhen's background. Her original husband was Meng Zhan from Tsangzhou. She was discontented and divorced her husband, Meng Zhan. She then turned around and married her brother-in-law. They had never seen such a shameless woman. A good woman should not marry a second husband. Why didn't the Lu clan capture a woman like Zhou Xian and drown her in the pond? The second lady, Zhou Xian, heard the way Mrs. Zhang addressed her. Her gloomy face darkened. Mrs. Zhang thought she had the upper hand and could not help but feel proud. After a woman marries, she should treat her husband as her god and be faithful to him. This is the model of women and the first virtue of women. I heard that when Mrs. Meng was still in Xianxia, she was discontented. Meng Zhan did not divorce you because he cared about the reputation of the two families. Instead they separated. It's not that I want to talk too much, but Mrs. Meng should really read the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and know what shame is. As soon as she said this, the entire room was silent. Mrs. Hu secretly glanced at the second lady. Her face was already extremely dark. The second lady took a sip of tea and suppressed the rising anger in her heart. Madame Zhang continued, "That daughter-in-law of mine is disobedient and absconds without permission. Such a wicked woman has tarnished the Zhang family's hundreds of years of reputation. We will naturally capture her back and interrogate her. As for you, Lady Meng, let me give you a piece of advice. You're still a slut yourself. Don't worry about other people's business." The second lady leaned against the table and threw the teacup in her hand at Mrs. Zhang's face. Seeing the tea and tea stains on Mrs. Zhang's face, the second lady laughed heartily. There was no sound in the room except for Mrs. Zhang's screams and the second lady's laughter that was as sweet as an oriole. Zhou Xian was born into a truly prestigious family. When it comes to knowledge, it's not up to you, a girl from a poor family who has fallen from grace, to comment. The second madam took off her clothes and said arrogantly, "Zhang Xiaoshi, you are an orphan daughter. Marrying Zhang Xiaoshi's only son is indeed a great achievement for you. She has a low status, so she feels inferior and lowly. She regards her husband as heaven and earth. I can understand that. After all, the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women is regarded as a standard by a woman who feels inferior and lowly. Do you think that I'm right?" Mrs. Zhang's eyes turned fierce. Jiang Nongqin, who had sensed the killing intent, reacted immediately. She went forward and captured Mrs. Zhang. The people from the Zhang residence saw that something was wrong and wanted to save her. They did not expect to be subdued by the Lu residence's servants. "You came to our Lu residence to make trouble. Why didn't Mrs. Zhang investigate the situation of our Lu residence? Also, you have to remember one thing. The second lady was arrogant and domineering. She walked up to Mrs. Zhang and pinched her chin with her armored fingers. "Call me Mrs. Lu. If you call me wrong, someone will die." Mrs. Zhang was shocked. She immediately understood why the people she sent to the Lu residence to ask for Shangguanwan had failed. Hearing that the second lady wanted to kill someone, she was shocked. Her heart thumped and her face turned pale. "How dare you?" She did not want to come and take Shangguanwan herself, but Shangguanwan left a divorce letter and ran away. It was a slap to Zhang Xiaoshi's face. Zhang Xiaoshi could not bear it and came to take Shangguanwan on New Year's Day. She also wanted to teach the Lu residents a lesson. However, she forgot that no matter what kind of person she was, they were all bullshit in the face of absolute power. Ever since the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women became popular in Hejian County, Zhou Xian was ostracized by a group of noble ladies. They avoided her in all activities. However, these noble ladies also forgot that Zhou Xian always liked to stay at home and did not bother to communicate with them. However, Zhou Xian did not show up for a long time, which gave everyone an illusion. Lu Shi's wife, Zhou Xian, was a remarried woman and a dirty woman who had gone through 2 husbands. She was not qualified to be on equal footing with them. The second lady asked in surprise, "Why wouldn't I dare? I wonder who gave Mrs. Zhang the illusion that I don't dare to?" After saying that, she suddenly pinched Mrs. Zhang's chin and forced her to come closer to her. The words that made Mrs. Zhang's body turn cold came out of the second lady's red and plump lips. "You're just from a small family and your horizons are limited. You've read the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and your already stupid brain has become even more stupid. If you don't believe me, you can go back and ask your husband. Ask him if I brought people to smash the Zhang residence's door. Would he dare to fight back? If he dares to fight back, I, Zhou Xian, will write my name backwards." Letting go of Mrs. Zhang's chin, Zhou Xian took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped her hands, as if she had touched something dirty. She pretended to say unintentionally, "You're indeed from a poor family. You're so petty. Mrs. Zhang was so angry that her face turned green. However, Nongqin's hand was like an eagle's claw that held her tightly. She could not break free. Mrs. Zhang is so proficient in the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Can you tell me if a woman's body is seen by a strange man, should she die as an apology? The second lady returned to her seat of honor and leaned lazily against the table. I remember that before Mrs. Zhang got married, you made a living by sewing and often went out to deal with the merchants of the embroidery workshop. One year you fell into the water and was rescued by a few passing villagers. Hehe. I wonder how many green hats Mrs. Zhang has made your husband wear? The second lady covered her mouth with her sleeve, her eyes filled with evil intentions. This matter can't be hidden. Tomorrow I'll go to Mrs. Zhang's house and ask if a shameless woman like you should be drowned in the pond to preserve Mrs. Zhang's reputation. After all, starvation is a small matter, but losing your chastity is a big deal. Mrs. Zhang should die to prove her innocence. Mrs. Zhang's face had already turned pale. She was afraid that the second lady would take her life. Although she did not think that Guzhen would dare to do so, her own life was more important. He could not take the risk. Send the guest out. The second lady's expression suddenly darkened. She waved her sleeve to send the guest out. Nongqin sent the distinguished Mrs. Zhang out as if she was catching a chick. Madam Hu smiled and said, Madam, you're really not afraid of trouble. Chapter 479. A good new year has been spoiled by this kind of person. What a disappointment. Madam Hu stood up with some displeasure on her face. The second lady took a sip of tea with a strange look in her eyes. She called Jiang Nongqin over. When will you depart? Jiang Nongqin bowed her head and said respectfully, In another 5 days, when everything in Hejian is settled, I'll depart for Xiangyang district. The second lady said, Leave with 1 as soon as possible. If you delay, I'm afraid there will be changes. Jiang Nongqin's expression changed and she said hesitantly, But madam, if that shrew comes again, the second lady said scornfully, So what if she comes? If she comes again, I'll break her legs. Although Madame Zhang was here to make trouble, she was right, because the missing Shangguanwan was indeed hiding in the Lu residence. Shangguanwan came to the Lu residence. Rather than saying that she left the divorce letter and ran away, it was more accurate to say that the second madam pitied her and gave her an idea and shelter. Otherwise, the grass on Shangguanwan's grave would have been as tall as a person. The second lady had seen the smart and lively Shangguanwan before. In her memory, this girl had always been a spoiled noble lady from a noble family. However, when they met again, she did not expect that such a lively and beautiful girl would be tortured to such a haggard and lifeless state. This matter had to start from 3 years ago. Shangguanwan's mother passed away due to illness and her father then remarried. The second wife was a noble lady from Zhongzhou and was not from a noble family. She was just a second wife and did not have a high status requirement. The second wife was a daughter of a concubine and did not bring a rich dowry. The only highlight was probably a few sets of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. She claimed to be familiar with the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and acted according to the contents of the books. It was funny that her humble appearance made her sisters-in-law and mother-in-law feel comfortable. The old lady was flattered and casually asked the second wife to teach Shangguanwan well and not neglect her. This second wife used a chicken feather as a token of authority and used the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women to teach Shangguanwan. How could Shangguanwan agree? As a noble lady from a noble family, she scoffed at the contents of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. The mother and daughter who had married halfway were quite unhappy. At first, the Shangguan family was biased towards Shangguanwan. As time went by, the second wife became pregnant, so Shangguanwan's advantage was instantly reduced, and she was suppressed by the stepmother. The real trigger that led to Shangguanwan's tragedy was her first engagement. Originally, the man had said that he was willing to wait until she was out of mourning, but the stepmother had somehow heard that Shangguanwan had once fallen into a bandit's lair, and she even said that Shangguanwan was a girl who had lost her virginity. Of course, this was not said in public, but it was indeed spread. His mother had read the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and deeply felt that the contents of the books were very reasonable. She increasingly felt that marrying a girl like Shangguanwan who had lost her virginity was a disgrace to the family, so she forcefully broke off the engagement. Shang Wanwan's engagement was broken off because of her reputation as a girl who had lost her virginity. Shang Wanwan became the joke of the entire Hejian county, and the Shangguan family was also deeply ashamed. The second wife was motherly and benevolent. She volunteered to teach Shang Wanwan and arranged another marriage for her. As the legitimate son of the Zhang family in Hejian, his status was not as high as that of the Shangguan family, but it was not too bad. However, Shang Wanwan later found out that her stepmother had sinister intentions. The stepmother and Zhang Xiaoshi, who was also Mrs. Zhang who had just come to make a scene, were on good terms. The legitimate son of the Zhang family turned out to be a naturally eunuch, and he was also weak and sickly. He was on his last breath and could not have sex at all. The stepmother arranged such a marriage for Shang Wanwan in the name of her own good, and directly pushed Shang Wanwan into the fire pit. However, this matter was not over yet. The sick legitimate son of the Zhang family was dying before the marriage. The stepmother persuaded Shang Wanwan to marry and become a widow with the excuse that the marriage has been decided, and Wan is the wife of the Zhang family. How can she marry someone else? Her words were full of sarcasm, and she repeatedly reminded Shang Wanwan that she was a girl who had lost her virginity. Zhang Xiaoshi refused to accept it. She said that Shang Wanwan had killed her son and insisted that Shang Wanwan marry over to keep her son's chastity. Shang Wanwan was isolated and helpless. Almost all of her family stood on the side of her stepmother. She could only be forced to marry into the Zhang family miserably. After the invalid died, she had to wear a wedding dress and marry a rooster. On the second day of marriage, she had to endure the sarcasm of her mother-in-law. As the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women became popular in Hejian, Shang Wanwan's life became more and more difficult. Not only her but those noble ladies who had been involved in bandits were more or less affected. The stepmother was on good terms with Zhang Xiaoshi, and she inadvertently mentioned that if a woman could not bear loneliness, she might commit adultery to vent her lust. This was also an act of destroying one's reputation and chastity. In Zhongzhou, unyielding widows would cut off their fingers to show their determination to keep their chastity. Zhang Xiaoshi was worried that Shang Wanwan was young and might make her son a cuckold. She hoped that Shang Wanwan could also cut off her fingers so that she could not bear loneliness and commit adultery. How could Shang Wanwan agree? But she was alone in the Zhang family, and no one in the Shangguan family thought that she was innocent. She did not think of a way she really could not live. Zhang Xiaoshi pressed her step by step, and Shang Wanwan clenched her teeth and refused to agree. How much pressure was she under? Finally, taking advantage of the opportunity to go up the mountain to worship Buddha, she simply chose to commit suicide. In the end, she did not succeed because she was stopped by the stepmother. After listening to Shang Wanwan's experience, the stepmother could not help but think of herself, who was once alone and helpless. Her heart softened and she agreed to save her. After a few days, Zhang Xiaoshi's patience ran out, and she was ready to ask someone to cut off Shang Wanwan's fingers. She left a divorce letter and successfully escaped from the Zhang family with the help of the Lu troop. To be safe, she did not live in the Lu family but in the troop camp instead. She hid there for more than half a year. Half a month ago, her traces were accidentally leaked, and Zhang Xiaoshi repeatedly sent people to ask for her. These people were all sent away, and in the end, Zhang Xiaoshi had no choice but to personally bring people over. Because of this, Jiang Nongqin was not in the mood to eat the New Year's banquet, and her face had been gloomy. Shang Wanwan had long changed out of her noble lady attire into coarse civilian clothes. She was now adapting well in the troop. Sister Nongqin, those people from the Lu family have left, right? A trace of fear flashed across her face, and she looked unusually nervous and fearful. She had completely lost her previous bravery and flamboyance. We have to leave for the north in advance, Jiang Nongqin said. Lady Wan, let's go together. If we stay here, sooner or later we won't be able to hide. She could hide the first time, but she could not hide forever. Shang Wanwan had left a divorce letter, but Zhang Xiaoshi had already determined that even if Shang Wanwan died, she would still be their soul. If she was caught and brought back, she would probably be tortured severely. In less than 10 days to half a month, the news of her sudden death would spread. In the past 2 years, Jiang Nongqin had saved many women who had been forced into a corner. They were all victims of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Now that the world was already so difficult, why did they still impose so many cruel shackles on innocent women? In this era where the clan's law was above the law, if the clan wanted to catch an unchaste woman and drown her in a pond, it would really be a dead end. Chapter 480. Everyone wanted to live and Shangguanwan was no exception. But after experiencing those dark months she would rather die than go back. Are we going north to look for Brother Lanting? Ever since she agreed to go north with them, Shangguanwan felt as if a heavy burden had been removed from her shoulders. She felt light and at ease. Yes. Jiang Nongqin nodded and added, the journey will be more dangerous. Lady Wan, you must be mentally prepared. Shangguanwan had vaguely heard about the situation in the north. She knew that the Tsingyi army and the Red Lotus group were fighting, but could they be more terrifying than the Zhang residents? Her eyes darkened and she said with determination, don't worry, Sister Nongqin. I'm not afraid. It was better to do this sooner rather than later. The troops were ready to depart in 2 days, which was 3 days earlier than the original plan. Shangguanwan had been hiding in the troop camp for more than half a year. In the beginning she was a little timid. Her mental state and emotions were very unstable and her body was very weak. Later, Jiang Nongqin took her to learn martial arts to strengthen her body. In addition, Shangguanwan had a certain foundation, so she learned very quickly. Even if he couldn't kill or capture them, at least he had the ability to protect himself. Zhang Xiaoxia was wronged in the Lu mansion. When she went back, she cried and complained to her husband, adding fuel to the fire. She thought that her husband would help her for the sake of her dead son, but he slapped Zhang Xiaoxia in the face instead. Not only that, he even scolded her for being short-sighted and wanted to drag her to the Lu residence to apologize. Zhang Xiaoxia was dumbfounded. Anger rose in her heart and she cried and scolded her husband. Why should I apologize to an unchaste woman? That Guzhen is not a good person. She is fickle. Don't tell me that even you have been seduced by her? She's harboring that little bitch, Shangguanwan. Do you want our son to die with everlasting regret? Zhang Xiaoxia's husband was also confused. He didn't know when his wife had become so unreasonable. He smiled coldly and said word by word. You ask me why? Just because she came from a prestigious family, just because her husband was the magistrate of Chongzhou. In today's world, if someone wants you dead, you can't live. Do you understand? Look at it the other way round. What do you have? Let's not talk about whether she was harboring her daughter-in-law or not. The key is, do you have any evidence? Where are the witnesses and material evidence? You don't have anything at all, yet you dare to come here and ask for him. What a shrew. Zhang Xiaoxia still wanted to refute, but her husband said again, you should stop interacting with the second wife of the Shangguan family in the future. Look at how disgusting you are now. You're torturing your daughter-in-law at home, but I'm turning a blind eye. I only hope that you don't go too far. Although Madame Shangguan doesn't love her anymore, she still has the blood of Shangguan in her bones. What right do you have to torture her to death? Zhang Xiaoxia opened her mouth and said awkwardly after a while, I'm her mother-in-law. Her husband chuckled coldly. She has already written the divorce papers and gone through the official channels. What kind of mother-in-law are you? You didn't give birth to her, nor did you raise her. What right do you have to decide her life and death? Just because of those books that you hold in your hands all day long? If you have the time, read the words of the real sages and stop reading these crooked things. Zhang Xiaoxia's husband said this not because he thought that the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was bad, but because his mother was also a remarried woman. If he acknowledged the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women, wouldn't he be scolding his old mother? Looking at Zhang Xiaoxia's absent-minded expression, he curled his lips and left. Zhang Xiaoxia suddenly broke down, with an expression that looked like she was about to cry. Her husband was determined to make her apologize to Guzhen. If she did not agree, her life in the residence would be difficult in the future. The legitimate son she gave birth to was sickly and naturally castrated, but the sons of her husband and other concubines were smart and healthy. Because of this, her husband felt that it was all Zhang Xiaoxia's fault that the legitimate son was handicapped. Ever since the legitimate son was born, he rarely entered her room. Her belly had never moved, but the sons and daughters of the concubines jumped out one after another. In the morning of the 2nd day of the new year, the troops were ready to leave. Before leaving, Lady Guzhen invited Shangguanwan to watch a good show. Shangguanwan looked at the plain and completely unfamiliar woman in the mirror in disbelief. She deeply felt the magic of Lady Guzhen's hands. My sister taught her. It's a good skill, the second lady said in a flat tone. I wonder what kind of show you want me to watch, madam? Shang Guanwan asked. The second lady said, you'll know in a while. Wait behind the screen and just watch the show. Not long after, the gatekeeper reported that Zhang Xiaoshi had come. Shang Guanwan subconsciously tensed up and clenched her fists tightly. Lady Zhang, what a rare guest. Why are you here? The second lady's voice passed through the screen and reached Shang Guanwan's ears. She said sarcastically, I don't have the young madam of the Zhang residence here. Do you want to bring people to search me today? After a while, Shang Guanwan heard the familiar voice of her former mother-in-law. Her usual sarcasm was replaced by flattery. She was humble and submissive. It was impossible to imagine how powerful and arrogant she was in the Zhang residence. But Shang Guanwan secretly bit her lower lip. She felt inexplicably carefree when she heard Zhang Xiaoshi flattering and apologizing to the second lady and calling her Madame Lu so intimately. The second lady's reaction was indifferent. She only responded impatiently after the other party said more than 10 sentences. Even though she was so neglectful, the other party still carefully flattered her. After hearing a lot of flattery, the second lady finally showed mercy and sent Zhang Xiaoshi away. The other party felt as if she had been pardoned. When the people of the Zhang residence had completely left, Shang Guanwan quietly walked out of the screen. The second lady said, Did you hear what was said just now clearly? Shang Guanwan nodded. Yes. The second lady took a sip of tea. The bright red rouge on her lips was still gorgeous. She opened her mouth slightly. In terms of prestige and status, the Lu residence is not much higher than the Zhang residence in Hejian. But you saw how she was just now. Why do you think that old woman is so submissive and flatters me everywhere? Shang Guanwan thought for a while. Because of Uncle Lu? Not because of my brother-in-law, but because of the troops in my brother-in-law's hands. The second lady said with a smile, we hit it off at first sight. I feel very sorry for what you've been through, so I'm here to say a few words. If you hold military power one day, those people will also flatter you shamelessly. Only when you're strong can you not be bullied by others. All external forces are unreliable. Now you can only rely on yourself. Shang Guanwan was the daughter of the Shangguan family's legal wife. No one dared to provoke her in the past. She had the highest status among the noble ladies in Hejian. Because she was doted on by the Shangguan family, everyone was afraid of the power behind her. But when Shang Guanwan lost the love of her family, she was violated and treated so harshly that she was almost forced to commit suicide. The second lady made it clear, and Shang Guanwan was a sensible person, so she understood what she meant. Chapter 481. Shang Guanwan was hesitant, and her face showed that she was struggling. The second lady said, although you despise those evil books, you still acknowledge them after all. Shang Guanwan's expression froze and she quickly denied, How is that possible? How could she agree with those books that were full of fallacious theories? The second lady asked her, If that's the case, why do you doubt that you can't do it? Shang Guanwan was dumbfounded and speechless. After a while, her hesitant eyes became firm and she bowed to the second lady. Thank you for your advice, madam. The second lady continued, The Shangguan family has your stepmother, so you can't get their protection. The Lu residents can't always protect you. If you want to get rid of Zhang completely, you can only rely on yourself in the future. Do your best and remember to take care of yourself. Shang Guanwan's eyes reddened and she gritted her teeth and nodded. Thank you, madam. She had also thought that if her mother hadn't suddenly died of illness, she wouldn't have ended up like this. At least she wouldn't have been tortured like this. But on second thought, what was the point of resenting these things? There were no ifs in this world and reality was reality. Instead of thinking about the past, it was better to think about one's future. The second lady watched Shang Guanwan leave and secretly shook her head. If it was the old Shang Guanwan, she wouldn't have needed to point these things out. However, after being tortured by her stepmother and the Zhang mansion, her pride had been broken in just a short 1 or 2 years. The 4 self-accomplishment classics for women that Shang Guanwan despised had also subtly poisoned her. Now she hoped that this child could be reborn and have another exciting life. Thinking of this, the second lady smiled gently, like a delicate flower in the water. You really like to meddle in other people's business. Madam, whose lazy voice came from behind. The second lady said calmly, I just see my own shadow in this little girl. She had her sister to protect her, but Shangguanwan had nothing, so she couldn't help but soften. Rather than saying that she was helping Shangguanwan, it was better to say that she was helping her own shadow. Zhang Zhaoshi left the Lu residence unwillingly and resentfully. She heard that a troop of the Lu residents was about to leave Hejian County. She tensed up and a trace of malice flashed across her face. After a while she said fiercely, Go after them. Her intuition told her that Shangguanwan must be among these troops. That little bitch wanted to fish in troubled waters and escape from Hejian County. Seeing that they were about to leave the territory of Hejian County, Shangguanwan was in high spirits, but the dense sound of hooves could be heard behind her. Don't be afraid. Jiang Nongqin's expression was still calm. She comforted Shangguanwan in a low voice. I'll deal with them. The 100 or so people who were chasing after them were the servants of the Zhang residence. Behind them was a speeding carriage. The curtain of the carriage was lifted. Zhang Zhaoshi was sitting inside with a gloomy face. Hand over the little bitch, Shangguanwan. Zhang Zhaoshi didn't care about the troops at all, because they were just servants and didn't even have the right to talk to her. Jiang Nongqin scoffed. She raised her hand and said in a hoarse voice, Get into formation and face the enemy. As soon as he finished speaking, the troops who were originally carrying heavy loads and hurrying on their way, formed a defensive formation as fast as they could. Hundreds of longbows were drawn and arrows were aimed at the people of the Zhang residence. Seeing this, Zhang Zhaoshi's face was so gloomy that ink seemed to drip out. Jiang Nongqin could be considered as half a disciple of Jiang Pingji. She would fight whenever there was a disagreement. If she could fight, she would never talk nonsense. Zhang Zhaoshi, who was weak in combat, could at most rely on the servants around her to act like a tyrant. Jiang Nongqin was not afraid of fighting with her fists. She asked Zhang Zhaoshi in a hoarse voice, Mrs. Zhang, is the person you're looking for here? Cold sweat broke out on Zhang Zhaoshi's forehead. She secretly held the crossbar of the carriage door tightly. Even if she felt that a group of servants would not dare to hurt her, the suffocating murderous intent still scared her. Facing hundreds of arrows that were pointed straight at her head, she felt that if her answer was not satisfactory, she might turn into a hornet's nest in the next second. He almost stopped breathing. She was afraid that the servants in front of her would harm her. In his heart he was secretly angry. These servants of the Lu residence actually dared to be so arrogant. Mrs. Zhang, is the person you're looking for here? Jiang Nongqin asked again with a calm expression. After a while, Zhang Zhaoshi swallowed her anger and said with a twisted face, No, I was wrong. When Jiang Nongqin heard this, a faint sarcasm appeared at the corner of her lips. She raised her hand and ordered the troops to put away their longbows. Zhang Zhaoshi looked at Nongqin's attire, and a trace of contempt flashed across her eyes. From her point of view, Nongqin was the most unladylike woman. She should be drowned in a pig cage and ridden on a wooden donkey. Let's go. Jiang Nongqin ordered a troop to cover the rear in case Zhang Zhaoshi attacked from behind. The rest of the people retreated in an orderly manner. Shangguanwan waited at the rear with rapid breathing. Seeing this situation, she slowly breathed a sigh of relief. A woman who bullies the weak and fears the strong is the easiest to get rid of. Jiang Nongqin came back with a cold face and concluded. Shangguanwan burst out laughing and her nervousness disappeared. I suddenly realized that Sister Nongqin's way of doing things is very similar to Brother Lanting's. How can I be compared to Lang Jun? Jiang Nongqin shook her head and turned over to get on the horse. Sco. Shangguanwan had learned horsemanship and archery when she was still in her boudoir. Later on, when the kidnappers happened, the residents hired a martial arts teacher for her. She also knew martial arts, not to mention that she had stayed in the troops' camp for more than half a year. If she fought seriously, some of the male troops might not be her match. Of course, since Shangguanwan had never seen blood on her hands, she would definitely be the one to die if they fought to the death. The journey to the north was rather difficult. The surrounding refugees not only coveted their clothes and food, but also the women in the camp. When they were approaching the border of Wanzhou, even Shangguanwan had killed a few people. The situation is unstable. There is a war in the north. The Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group are fighting fiercely. After more than half a month, the 2,000 troops had lost a lot of weight. Shangguanwan, who had always been pampered, had also lost weight. Her skin had darkened, but she had become much more capable. Shangguanwan had a saber hanging on her waist. She was dressed in clothes that could barely keep out the cold, and she wore a coarse cloak. Even so, most of the people who are implicated are innocent people. Shangguanwan's face was gloomy. She really could not relax in such a hellish scene. Along the way, the increasingly harsh and cruel reality taught her a harsh lesson. In the outside world, there were no luxurious clothes and no tall buildings. Corpses that died of illness or froze to death by the roadside were one after another. Birds that could not find food in winter fed on the corpses, and they would peck a complete corpse until it was broken. If the battles in the inner chamber were like needles hidden in silk floss, and the tongue was the most powerful weapon, then the battles in the outside world were different. There were too many factors that could threaten the lives of the common people. The bitter cold of winter, the shortage of food, the bandits who spread rumors of killing, the 2 rebel armies that fought everywhere and injured the people by mistake. Not only that, but they also had to guard against their companions. Chapter 482. Jiang Nongqin looked at Shangguanwan's serious side profile and sighed secretly. If a woman's growth had to be built on injuries, it would be too cruel. After a short rest, everyone in the troops set off again. After the 5th day of the new year, Xiangyang district recovered from the joy of the new year. Restaurants, tea houses and other shops opened one by one. The people in the district headquarters also began to actively prepare for the battle after the spring plowing. The training of the new recruits became stricter and stricter. At the same time, they had to recruit soldiers and horses everywhere. In other words, the subordinates were still working overtime. As the Lord, Jiang Pingji was still slacking off. However, there was one more person slacking off with her. It was Zhang Ping from the Mahist family. As the saying goes, a pillow comes after a nap. Jiang Pingji was still complaining that the scholars from the Mahist family were all dead. There was not even a shadow of them. Then Zhang Ping came to her on his own initiative. After careful observation, she found that Zhang Ping was very intelligent and was a promising talent. Therefore, she brought Zhang Ping with her all day long and taught him about the woodworking workshop. My lord's wonderful ideas are really admirable. For an otaku who was addicted to mechanisms, what could be more attractive than a variety of model figurines? Jiang Pingji took him to see the models of various siege weapons. After her selection and training, the craftsman in the woodworking workshop could already make some simple models of the weapons according to the blueprints. These models were not just for show. If they were enlarged according to the scale, they would be real siege weapons. Zhang Ping did not know that attacking and defending a city could be played in this way. It was very interesting. Zhang Ping, who was originally indifferent to this matter, was now also interested. How to make the defending party pay the least price to defend the city. How to make the attacking party pay the least price to take down the city. His mind was full of these thoughts. He even threw aside the water wheel that he had been studying previously. If Jiang Pingji had not accidentally seen his things, he did not know when the water wheel would see the light of day again. What is this? Jiang Pingji poked the water wheel model. Did you make it? Zhang Ping was startled for a moment. He smiled and said, yes. I saw that the farmers had a hard time irrigating, so I thought about how to save manpower and make irrigation more convenient. However, I tried several times but I always failed. You see, it's not smooth, but I don't know what the reason is. Zhang Ping's ambition was to be a hermit, with a beautiful wife and a crane, living a carefree life. The direction of his research was also biased towards the livelihood of the people, unlike Jiang Pingji. Apart from improving farming tools in the beginning, the rest of her research was applied to war. Jiang Pingji said, let me take a look. The water wheel was indeed a very bold design. To the viewers in the live broadcast room, it was very normal. However, in today's world, it was truly shocking. If Zhang Ping's research was successful and it was put into practice, who knew how many people would benefit? Jiang Pingji was very concerned about the people's livelihood. Naturally, she hoped that the water wheel would succeed. In addition to the water wheel, Zhang Ping also had a pulley for fetching water. This thing had been around for a long time, but it was not widely used. Zhang Ping planned to use it to fetch water. His explanation was also very simple. Some people lived high up in the mountains, but the rivers were at the foot of the mountains. If they wanted to drink water, they had to go down the mountain to fetch water, which was time-consuming and laborious. However, if they installed this pulley and tied a hemp rope to a wooden bucket, they could directly throw it down the mountain, which was convenient and laborious. It could also be installed on the wells, making it easier for the commoners to fetch water. It's a good idea. Jiang Pingji nodded in agreement. She did not care how it was to be installed on the mountain, but the wells could be installed. Previously, when she looked at the files of the district headquarters, several cases of well drowning were written on it. When the victim was fetching water, the bucket was too heavy, which caused his center of gravity to shift forward. He accidentally fell into the mouth of the well and lost his life. If it was installed on the mouth of the well, the commoners only had to squat by the well to fetch water safely. The safety factor would increase significantly. In the dead of winter, Feng Jin and the rest looked coldly at Zhang Ping as he busied himself. He led the craftsmen of the woodworking workshop to install the pulley for the wells in Xiangyang district and taught the commoners seriously how to use it. It was still in the dead of winter. What kind of temptation could make a hermit who was detached from worldly affairs willingly do such hard labor? Why are you all looking at me like that? Jiang Pingji comfortably drank hot tea to warm herself. She planned to dry some dried fruits next year so that she could make tea in winter. When she raised her head, a few of her subordinates looked at her strangely. Jiang Pingji felt a little creeped out. Have the improved seeds for spring plowing been distributed? Have the farming tools been arranged? Have the cattle been allocated? Have the fields of each household been counted? If not, why are you looking at me? Get to work. Everyone sneered in their hearts. Then they buried their heads in work. They had never seen such a shameless person. This person was actually their lord. The only one who did not find it strange was probably Wuxia. Ever since he decided to push Zhang Ping into the fire pit, he knew that such a day would come. As a friend, he did not wish for Zhang Ping's talents to be buried in the wilderness. In today's world, one could not live in peace by hiding. With such thoughts in mind, Wuxia filtered suitable candidates with a clear conscience. He planned to conquer Fengyi County after the spring plowing and send letters to his companions one by one. As an injured person who was still recuperating, he could not work for too long. He could not bear to see a group of colleagues working day and night. The only way was to find someone to share the work. There was a shortage of talents. If it was not for Zhang Ping's incompetence in government affairs, he would have pulled him over to work like a slave. The work in the government office was quite heavy. The only praiseworthy thing was the food in the small kitchen. I like this braised pork with vinegar sauce the most. Sweet and sour. I really don't know where my lord found such a good chef. Compared to the food I've eaten before, it's like chaff. There were 10 small plates on the table in front of Su Ku, enough to fill up 4 to 5 mouthfuls of food. Although they were all meat dishes, there were 2 bowls of vegetable soup that tasted great. Feng Jin silently agreed with this. Hiding behind his sleeves, he secretly touched his somewhat bloated belly. It was so delicious that they wished they could freeload 3 meals a day at the district headquarters. Only delicious food could eliminate their resentment of working overtime. Jiang Pingji's food was no different from that of her subordinates, but she had a large appetite. The amount of each meal was 3 to 4 times that of others. I suddenly thought of something, Jiang Pingji said. Why don't we secretly open a restaurant? Everyone was drinking tea to aid digestion after eating. When they heard that Jiang Pingji wanted to stir up trouble again, their nerves tensed up. However, Wuxia gently answered, "Why did my lord have such an idea? Those in power should not compete with the people for benefits. Otherwise, if the government and the business combined, how could the people's businesses survive? If his lord took the lead in doing so, it would be difficult to suppress the trend in the future." Chapter 483. What did they think? Was there a need to ask this question? Jiang Pingji's suggestion was undoubtedly a divine weapon to increase their favorability. If favorability could be quantified, she might be able to see that the favorability of her subordinates had soared to the highest level of loyalty. No matter what happened in the future, they would not easily change their minds. Jiang Pingji thought about it and added, "If we open a restaurant, we need waiters, people who do chores in the backyard, and shopkeepers who manage the restaurant. A medium-sized restaurant needs to employ at least 20 to 30 people. Orphans, widows, or those who are disabled because of the war can find a suitable position to support their families if they don't have a job. After all, if we ask them to farm, it's really difficult for them." Everyone was touched by Jiang Pingji's words. Wuxia showed a dazed expression and fell into his memories. Fighting with the people for benefits was indeed criticized. But what if the money she earned was all used on the orphans of the war and the elderly who had no one to support them? And the soldiers who were disabled because of injuries, how would they make a living after leaving the battlefield? In Wei Xi's memory, other than the person in front of him, it seemed that no feudal lord would take these problems seriously. Many feudal lords just handed matters over to their subordinates, just to fight for a good reputation of benevolence and love for the people. With a good reputation, their goal would be achieved. As for how the future would develop, they did not have the energy to care at all. This led to a period of time when the situation slightly relaxed. The silver allocated for retirement would be exploited layer by layer. In the end, only a few coins would fall into the hands of orphans and widows. But Her Majesty was different. She really did it. It was just that she did the best, but her reputation was the worst. Why was it like this? Wei Xi looked at Jiang Pingji in a daze. Because this person's temperament was too casual and arrogant, she only needed to capture anyone who coveted this batch of pension money, and let the greedy person gather 10 times or even 100 times the amount of money to return. Her attitude was unyielding, and whoever dared to disobey her without exception would end up with their heads rolling on the ground. Unfortunately, these people had a glib tongue and were eloquent. They smeared her reputation behind her back. What about Her Majesty? My time is precious, I don't care to argue with ants. In this life he would be the one to argue. While Wei Xi was in a daze, Feng Jin had already bowed with his hands folded in front. My lord's action is a good deed. Jin will naturally support it with all my might. If the generals and soldiers unfortunately died in battle, their orphans and widows would have someone to rely on and provide for them. The disabled soldiers would also be able to make a living. If this is feasible, I believe the soldiers will be completely at ease and not have to worry about the future. This action was benevolent to Feng Jin and the others, but to Jiang Pingji it was a matter of course. The soldiers were willing to risk their lives for her, so she naturally had to be worthy of their loyalty. Feng Jin and the rest were moved by Jiang Pingji's growth. The audience in the streaming room also started discussing it. Lao Ciji Lianming. I started following the live stream not long after it started. Looking back, the streamer has really grown a lot. It wasn't that the host wasn't good in the past, it was just that she was too tough and self-centered in the past. Now she was becoming more and more like a benevolent ruler, more and more in line with what an excellent ruler should be like. For the people in troubled times, this was a blessing. Qijing Pokalai. I hope that when I'm old I can still continue following the live stream with my grandchildren and tell them how outstanding the streamer is. Although she's just Jiang Pingji, she led a group of subordinates to conquer the world and gave the people a peaceful and contented life. Livestream, you must not let us down. You are these beasts. If I were a commoner, it would definitely be a very happy thing to be protected by the streamer like this. Buting. I believe that the streamer can become a true emperor, unprecedented and unsurpassed. Wangban Yinjing, I hope that in my lifetime I can see my lord rule the world. The livestream room was full of praises. Even Jiang Pingji, who was as thick-skinned as the corner of the city wall, felt somewhat embarrassed. If that's the case, then I'll get someone to organize the menu. Jiang Pingji thought about it and said hesitantly, the income from the restaurant business is all used to provide for orphans and widows. In the beginning, the scale is small and the income is not high, so others naturally don't care about it. But in the future, with these unique flavors and dishes, I think the business of the restaurant will not be too bad, and the income will naturally increase. I'm a little worried. If the income was a few coins, who would care about it? But what if it was easily tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of strings of coins? Jiang Pingji did not think that anyone would not be tempted. Lian was a little naive. From his point of view, no matter how good the business of the restaurant was, how high could the income be? Not to mention that the restaurant had not even opened yet, but his lord was already worried that someone would embezzle money in the future. He asked, the income is used to provide for orphans and widows of the soldiers who died in the war, as well as compensation for the bereaved. Would there really be beasts who would embezzle money? Wei Xi smiled and said, even Han Mei said that those people are beasts. How can we use the thinking of ordinary people to measure them? I think that my lord's worries are not without reason. It's better to be prepared for a rainy day. Since this is for the good of the soldiers so that they will no longer have to worry about the future when they go to the battlefield, then this matter cannot be treated casually. Punish those who are greedy lest the soldiers' hearts turn cold. What does my lord think? Of course, Zixiao's words make sense. Jiang Pingji raised her brows. Currently we only have one base in Xiangyang district. The scale of the restaurant is not large and the income is not high. If we use this bit of money to provide for orphans and widows of the soldiers, everyone will think it is absurd. How about this? I will donate 20,000 strings of coins as the initial compensation. If it is not enough, I will add more in the future. Wei Xi's fingers trembled. He almost could not keep the expression on his face. 20,000 strings of coins? Had his lord ever been so extravagant? Didn't she always want to break a coin into 4 coins to use? Looking around, it seemed that no one was surprised. This was 20,000 strings of coins, not 2 coins. Others did not know, but Su Ku was very clear about how rich his lord's private treasury was. Not to mention 20,000 strings of coins, even if it was 200,000 strings of coins she could still take it out. Sai Hu asked the people of the north borderline to be stupid, rich and squandering. They were too rich, they were too extravagant, they were practically fighting to buy glass tea sets and jewelry. No one could stop them. Not only that, the business of wool products in Chongzhou was also not bad. In a short period of time, they had accumulated tens of thousands of strings of coins. The first batch of silver was mostly used for the construction of Xiangyang district, the purchase of rations, armor and the manufacture of weapons. The second batch of silver was the one that truly entered the lord's private treasury. After receiving it, his lord generously gave each of her subordinates a big red packet. Even Feng Jin's family's Chongqing was given a 1-month gift. It was unbelievably extravagant. If there was a ranking list of the feudal lord's wealth in the future, his lord would probably occupy the top spot all year round. Jiang Pingji looked around. Then this matter. Chapter 484. It was easy to make mistakes in this matter. Only those who were meticulous and determined could do it. If it was done well, it would be a great plus. The things at the beginning were not complicated. Wei Ci could handle it with his current physical condition. When the workload increased in the future, his body would probably recover. More importantly, she felt that Wei Ci could be trusted. He had the ambition to rule the world. Money could not blind him. Wei Ci accepted it without hesitation. He was thinking of formulating a relatively complete compensation process. I will not let you down. Combining the experience from his previous life and the analysis and improvement in this life, he felt that he was the most suitable person to do this. Yes, remember to get Xiaoyu to approve the 20,000 strings of coins. Yes. Jiang Pingji did not value money. She often used her private treasury as the public treasury and left it to the accountant to manage. Suka did not know whether to laugh or cry at her attitude. Throughout the ages, which leader did not use the public treasury as his private treasury? His lord was capricious and reversed the roles. It was reasonable that Jiang Pingji did not feel distressed about the money. It came from the strong wind. Why would she feel distressed? Speaking of which, the north borderline had already sold 4 batches of glass. Jiang Pingji felt that she could slow down and whet the appetite of the fat sheep. After the first month, the weather was still so cold. The entire Xiangyang district had an atmosphere of impending war. The people faintly felt that the atmosphere was subtle. The government office was busy again. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses move, the provisions and fodder go first. War was not only a contest of military strength, tactics, and wisdom, but also a contest of financial resources and logistics. Rations and fodder, horses, siege equipment, armors, weapons. Every one of them burned money. Especially defensive armors and weapons used in war, they cost a lot of money. Jiang Pingji could not let her soldiers go to the battlefield in plain clothes and holding a wooden spear. That was not a battlefield. It was queuing up to talk to the king of hell. It was sending the enemy's head. Jiang Pingji heard the statistics in the account book given by Su Ku and secretly said, poor. If she could make armor here. Jiang Pingji squinted her eyes and thought of the plan she made when she first came to Xiangyang district. Xiangyang district was very likely to contain iron ore. However, whether the iron ore was real or not was her personal judgment. He could not be completely sure. Once she had some free time, she planned to bring some people to investigate. If there really was an iron mine, it would save a lot of money. After the long winter training, the new soldiers had already adapted to the heavy training. Coupled with the ample food and water supply, not only did the soldiers not lose weight, but they also became stronger. The old clothes that originally fit them seemed a little tight on their bodies. Before he couldn't even carry a load for 3 to 5 miles, but now he could carry a log and run a round trip. Therefore, a person's potential was like a sponge that could be squeezed out with some squeezing. There was no need to be lenient when it came to training these burly male soldiers. As long as they didn't die, then they would work them to death. Not only did the recruits and veterans have to undergo all kinds of physical training, but they also had to practice military formations. In ancient times, the methods of transmitting information were too backward, especially in a place like a battlefield that was constantly changing. Military formations could maximize the effectiveness of the soldiers' cooperation in battle, such as cutting the enemy's formation, surrounding them, outflanking them, and strategically retreating. All these required extremely strong execution. Jiang Pingji would not allow even one deserter from her army. As long as you're told to charge, you'll have to do it no matter what. If you were told to retreat, even if the enemy's head was in your hands, you couldn't be greedy for the spoils of battle. They had to follow orders strictly and strictly. Over and over, they had to repeat it in a dull manner until they developed a reflexive reaction that could immediately act when they heard orders. After the first month of the lunar year, the people in the men's camp clearly felt that the atmosphere was much more solemn than before. Their training was enhanced and their meals were better. The sky was pitch black. As soon as the military camp's whistle sounded, the soldiers had to get up and put on their clothes as quickly as possible and gather at the drill ground. In the beginning, most of the soldiers couldn't do it. After a long time, those who couldn't do it before could also do it. Of course, there was another important reason why they would put in so much effort in training. They were stimulated by the hundreds of female soldiers in the women's camp. Ever since the mocking incident in the recruit camp, Jiang Pingji would post an explanation notice every few days. The people of Xiangyang district were skeptical at the beginning, but they became skeptical later on. Some families felt that the girls were a hindrance, so they made up their minds and sent the more cumbersome girls at home to the women's camp. The number of people in the women's camp slowly increased to 600, finally reaching the expected number. Jiang Pingji didn't let others take over the training of the women's camp. Instead, she took the field herself. Upon seeing the situation, Su Ku secretly shed tears of sympathy for the young ladies in the women's camp. He was one of the few people who knew about his lord's ability to ruthlessly destroy flowers. As expected, the people in the women's camp who were looked down upon by the outside world and even had a contemptuous attitude officially ushered in a hellish life. The training load was only 20% less than that of the male soldiers. For these thin and weak girls, it was cruel. Jiang Pingji was usually easy to talk to, but once she entered the instructor mode, unless the female soldiers couldn't stand the exhaustion and fainted, or there were other unavoidable circumstances, she wouldn't show any mercy at all. As long as they were awake, as long as their noses could still breathe, even if they had to crawl on the ground to the finish line. The viewers in the streaming room couldn't take it anymore. Streamer, if you treat cute girls like this, be careful of the wrath of the heavens. Streamer V. When I entered the military school at the age of 5 or 6, the training I went through was heavier than this. In today's world, cute girls are used to be bullied. Without the ability to protect themselves, they can only become the playthings of others. If you pity them, it's not love but harm. If they suffer a little now, they will suffer less in the future. I love them, do you understand? If you love them, then train them to their death. This was Jiang Pingji's consistent dogma. Lao Ciji Lianming. Children don't understand the streamer's love, but they will understand in the future. Kizo Bupaba. Although it's a little distressing, what the streamer said is also right. In troubled times, no one can protect anyone. If they don't want to be treated as a reproduction machine, an item to be bought and sold, or a reserve of food, these girls can only rely on themselves to work hard. Looking at the content of the streaming, almost all of them cried when they were kidnapped by their families. They were obviously abandoned by their families. Even if they didn't suffer with the streamer, they would still be tortured at home. Jin Tian Senging. I hope they can learn something from the streamer. No matter how weak a grass is, it can still overcome the oppression of a stubborn rock. A group of girls ranging in age from 13 to 16 cried miserably while gritting their teeth to train. Long-distance running with weights was fine. They could still dawdle and slack off for a while on the way. Weapon training was miserable. If one's posture was not standard, Jiang Pingji would use a rolled-up whip to help correct it. Her attitude was extremely strict. Chapter 485. What was annoying was that after soaking in the medicinal herbs provided by the military camp, their muscles were no longer so sore. They couldn't even find an excuse to be lazy. It was still winter. If they didn't want to freeze to death, they could only keep exercising to generate heat. If they fell behind, they might be buried in the snow and freeze to death. Their lord also warned them that if anyone froze to death in the snow, she wouldn't be responsible. They could either lie down and freeze to death or grit their teeth and get up. No one wanted to die. Even ants wanted to live, let alone these young girls from poor families. Faced with the crisis of survival during training, everyone was full of energy and would occasionally help each other. If you help me this time, I'll help you next time. I promise to survive every dark day. With the increase in training, their appetite would definitely increase. Their appetite was like that of a kitten. Now it was as if they were fighting to be reincarnated. Jiang Pingji's attitude toward the female soldiers was quite strict. Could even be considered harsh. The male soldiers felt chills down their spines when they saw it. Others couldn't bear to hurt them, but Jiang Pingji wouldn't go easy on them. Once she gave these young girls the illusion that they would get preferential treatment if they acted coquettishly and pitifully, they wouldn't really work hard. Instead, they would be fearless. Regardless of whether it was women or men, they all had a natural laziness in their bones. Jiang Pingji couldn't let this laziness sprout. Instead, she had to kill it in the cradle. Therefore, Jiang Pingji didn't show any mercy from beginning to end. Her heart was as hard as iron. She didn't even show a trace of gentleness. Unlike the male camp, apart from basic physical training and weapons training, there was no military drill in the female camp. Instead, there was a course on first aid skills. She recruited one of the doctors she hired to be the temporary lecturer. Not only did he have to impart the first aid knowledge and skills that Jiang Pingji had created, but he also had to teach them basic medical skills. At first, the doctor thought it was a fantasy. However, when there was a high reward, there would always be brave men. The doctor gave in. It was like this every day for more than 2 months. I believe it now. She's preparing to use women as men. It had been more than 2 months since Jiang Pingji taught the new recruits a lesson. The female soldiers in the female camp had undergone earth-shaking changes. His slender figure and timid expression were gone, replaced by a well-proportioned figure and a serious expression. Girls nowadays were about 1.5 to 1.6 meters tall. Very few were taller than that. Jiang Pingji was an exception. Due to the large amount of training and sufficient nutrition, these little girls had the tendency to continue to grow. After nightfall, the female soldiers had some free time. 10 people to a tent, and the beds were all next to each other. Hearing the girl in the same tent grumble, the other female soldiers couldn't help but complain. Even men aren't that pitiful, right? I have a brother who is also in the men's barracks. I heard he has it much easier than us. The 10 girls were silent for a while, and the atmosphere was eerily quiet. After a while, I heard that the district headquarters recruited women to serve the men. It scared me to death. They were all unmarried girls. They didn't understand the relationship between men and women, but they knew what a prostitute was. How could a girl from a pure family be willing to lower herself to become a lowly prostitute? A female soldier who was lying in a warm blanket said softly, "Well, I don't know if I should be happy or cry. They should be happy that they didn't have to be prostitutes, but they had been crying all this time. Every day they almost crawled back to their tents. A few of them hid in their blankets and cried bitterly. The female soldier from before turned over and lied on her stomach. I heard my brother say, 'Our salaries will be coming tomorrow.' We have salaries?" Everyone was stunned. Why didn't they know about it? Yes, my brother accidentally heard it. He said that everyone gets 100 copper coins and 2 buckets of rice a month. This was not a high standard, but considering that the female soldiers used the barracks for food, drink, and clothing, it wasn't low. "Is this news accurate?" the others quickly asked. "It should be accurate. After all, we are soldiers too. According to the Lord, we have to go to the battlefield to kill enemies in the future. Otherwise, why do we learn these things?" Speaking of this, the female soldier added with a smile, "I heard that in the barracks next door, everyone receives the same salary as us." At this moment, a 15 or 16-year-old girl shrunk her neck and said in a low voice, "I'm afraid of death." Another said, "Look at what you're saying. Who isn't afraid of death? When I was sent here by my stepmother, I wanted to just die like that. But now I can go to the battlefield and kill enemies. If I accidentally make military contributions in the future, I might even be able to become a female general. Just like those novels in the past, how awe-inspiring. Is this okay? Their salaries are the same as those men. Why is it different if they make military contributions? The group of young girls thought silently. It didn't seem impossible. At this moment, a girl lying in the innermost part of the tent spoke. I'd rather die on the battlefield than go home. If I go home, I might be sold to some ugly man as a wife. I'll be beaten every day and live worse than the pigs at home. It's better to beat people, it hurts too much. Speaking of beating people, these young girls had something to talk about. My sister was beaten to death by her mother-in-law. After marrying into their family, she didn't have a day of rest. She would be slapped every time she ate a few more mouthfuls of food. If she was late to work in the fields, she would be beaten even harder. Later, when she was 9 months pregnant, her mother-in-law still beat her. She sprained her ankle and fell to the ground. That old B*T said she was pretending. In the end, the child and sister died. That old B*T was fine. If I get married in the future, whoever dares to beat me will be beaten to the ground. Hehe, can you beat them? Those old men are really strong. Learn well now. If you can't beat them, do you want to be beaten? What if you're beaten to death? Come on, they don't have much strength. We don't have enough to eat all day, why would we be afraid of a weakling? Chatting before bed was almost the only fun for the female soldiers. The training during the day was heavy and there were people patrolling at night, so they fell asleep very quickly. The next day there were indeed people carrying food and copper coins. This news made the female soldiers excited. Each of them received 200 coins and 4 buckets of rice. That was 2 months' worth of salary. Before they could get over their excitement, Jiang Pingji, who had traumatized everyone, appeared. Many of them subconsciously shivered. Have all of you received your salary? She asked. More than 2 months was enough for the female soldiers to know Jiang Pingji's character. When answering questions, they must shout and answer loudly. Chapter 486. Jiang Pingji glanced at the crowd. Copper coins are easy to deal with. You can put them anywhere. But you live in the barracks and you don't have to pay for the food, so what do you plan to do with the food you receive? Do you send it home to your parents and brothers, or do you exchange it for copper coins and keep it for yourself? The crowd didn't understand what she meant, but the audience in the streaming room understood instantly. Lao Siji Lianming, streamer, you're so bad. Jintian Siging, the streamer is up to something bad. She's alienating these female soldiers from their families. This batch of female soldiers were almost unwilling. They were seen as burdens and abandoned by their families and were forced to join them. At that time, these families thought that the girls were there to be prostitutes in the camp, but they still gave them away. It was clear what kind of people they were. Such coldness made even Jiang Pingji feel a little bitterly disappointed. Therefore, she wanted to know whether the fruits of the girls' hard training would be kept for themselves or given away selflessly. It turned out that Jiang Pingji's subtle influence during this period was effective. Some stubborn female soldiers hoped to exchange the food for copper coins and keep it for themselves. But there were still more than 200 girls who chose to give their salaries to their families to help them. Jiang Pingji's eyes showed some interest. Those who chose to keep it for themselves, you did well. It's not unfilial. You just made the most correct decision. Jiang Pingji said leisurely. As for those who chose to help their families, you are very kind. I don't know how much merit your families have done in their previous lives to have such good daughters in this life. It's a pity that they didn't cherish you. You'll walk your own path in the future. Let's start today's training. The female soldiers were still anxious, but when they heard Jiang Pingji's words, they had mixed feelings. When she said the training would start, they tensed up one by one. The morning and the first 2 hours of the afternoon were physical training to learn how to defeat the enemy. The rest of the time was to learn first aid from the doctor. From that month onward, there would be an assessment every 10 days. Those who failed would have a part of their salaries deducted, while those who performed well would be rewarded. Under such encouragement, no one dared to take it lightly. But the wooden spear in the female soldier's hand fell, and a numb feeling came from her wrist. Jiang Pingji said calmly, "Pick it up and continue." She let each female soldier fight with her once, and each of them had their wooden spear knocked away as soon as they came up. Jiang Pingji pointed out the points that they should pay attention to. She spoke in detail and the girls listened attentively. Only after all of them had been taught a lesson would they know where they had gone wrong and be more careful next time. Jiang Pingji believed in one rule. Before learning to hit someone, one must first learn to be hit. Compared to the training of the wooden spear, Jiang Pingji taught them more about close combat. She taught them how to counterattack when they were at a disadvantage in all aspects. The female soldiers felt a little shy at first. It was too cruel and dirty. But after they got used to it, they felt that it was quite exciting. Nowadays, women's bodies were generally weaker than men's. This disadvantage couldn't be changed in a short time, so it was better to choose to play to their strengths and avoid their weaknesses. Since his strength was inferior to his enemies, he would increase his speed and agility. When killing enemies on the battlefield, the only thing that mattered was whether the enemy died or not how the enemy died. The scale of the women's battalion was small. Jiang Pingji would not let them be the vanguard. She would definitely start with logistics and cleaning up the battlefield. She would first see some blood and train up their courage. Once their physical qualities were generally strengthened, she would have the next step in her plan. At the end of the day, there were two reasons why women had such a low status in society. Firstly, it was because of their bodies. Secondly, it was because their labor productivity was lower than that of men. The strength of the former could directly affect the benefits of the latter. In Jiang Pingji's world, there was a series of training methods for women's physical fitness. It could also be called the art of physical training. She slowly prepared for it for a few years. She eliminated some of the segments that could not be achieved with current technology and added other training programs. Then she integrated them into a book and prepared to use it specifically for the women's battalion. All female soldiers in the women's battalion had to follow the training. If she really sat on the throne, she would promote it to the whole country. In this era, the difference in physical qualities between men and women was not as great as imagined. As long as they trained properly and had sufficient food and nutrition, the gap between them was very small. Jiang Pingji was still working hard to improve farming techniques to reduce physical exertion as much as possible. In this way, the difference in labor productivity would be further reduced. The only thing that was troublesome was that women had their menstrual periods every month. The gestation period was as long as 10 months. In addition to postpartum recovery, well, a year passed in the blink of an eye. On the other hand, men did not have such worries. Regarding this, Jiang Pingji was really at her wits' end. After all, in this era, reproduction could only rely on the most backward method of artificial reproduction. If women gave birth less, the population would not increase. Therefore, those who tormented the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and prevented widows from remarrying were idiots. The emperor of Xianxia was even more retarded. This world was not like her previous world. Both parents only had to go to a specialized institution for surgery and pick up the child at the specified time. According to the federal law, which woman or person dared to let a woman give birth naturally was against the law. Even so, most federal citizens still did not like to have children because it was too troublesome. Seeing the population decline and the war population consumption was high, to alleviate the population pressure, the federal government had no choice but to pass a bill and start the population growth plan. When both men and women came of age, there would be compulsory donations. The government would screen for good genes and breed high-quality babies. The specific information of both parents would be written on the child's ID card to prevent blood relations from going haywire. After the baby was born, the federal government would be responsible for all the upbringing. According to the technology of this era, they could only be a dream. There was no way to avoid the menstrual period because the genes of women were still in a relatively inferior stage. This problem could not be eradicated, but she could think of ways to delay the gestation period. For example, female soldiers were allowed to retire in their 20s. Before retirement, they were not allowed to have any childbirth activities. After retirement, they would be given all kinds of preferential treatment. Some female soldiers could even stay in the military camp and continue to be instructors to train the next generation. They did not have to go to the battlefield, they only had to take care of logistics. Under such circumstances, the female soldiers could find someone to marry and have children with peace of mind. Jiang Pingji was also a little worried about the age limit. It was too late. In the eyes of the world, people of the same age as them were already old enough to be grandmothers. The female soldiers were a group of old women. It was too early and their military service time was too short. It was a waste of resources. Jiang Pingji did not want to let them go. She told this problem to a group of subordinates wanting to seek their opinions. Set it at 24 years old? Wei Xi thought about it and said, this age should be more suitable. Qiguan Rang seconded. My lord, you really don't have to be so careful. The military registration has always been different from other things. You can make the decision. In this era, soldiers had a specific military registration. Female soldiers were treated equally, so naturally there was one. However, to let the female soldiers marry after 24 years old was not like the palace maids. Once they entered the palace, they could never come out again. Li Yun, this honest child, had a problem. Isn't it too late to get married at 24 years old? Can you find a man who is still unmarried? Jiang Pingji glanced sideways and said disdainfully, you can choose the male soldiers you captured after defeating the enemy. Chapter 487. Picket will. These 3 words echoed in everyone's mind. Wei Xi relied on his superhuman willpower to hold back his laughter. His Majesty was still so overbearing and willful. As for the others, well, they were shocked at first, but they quickly accepted this setting. Normally, the captives were sent by the demons to do hard labor and labor. No one cared about them. Now that they were given a chance to form a family, the captives might fight for it. However, in order not to give the captives a sense of superiority or even treat the female soldiers harshly, they felt that this matter had to be considered at length. Jiang Pingji was stunned and asked, why do you say so? Feng Jin said, a captive is a captive. They belong to the slave register and are of the lower class. My lord's action may be misinterpreted. If someone else publicized that Jiang Pingji had captured slaves and assigned them female soldiers as wives, would this be acceptable? Jiang Pingji was stunned. This seemed to make sense. However, if the female soldiers retired in their 20s, the men of the same age were either married twice or even thrice. Who knew how many children they had? Wouldn't it be even more unfair to let the female soldiers that she had meticulously trained marry someone else and become a stepmother? He wanted to hear what they had to say. Qiguan Rang understood what he meant and explained to Jiang Pingji with a faint smile. If the captives are used to reward the female soldiers, form a family and settle the marriage issue, then the household register should be headed by the female soldiers so that the children born in the future won't follow their father into the slave register. If we don't do this, my lord's painstaking efforts will be in vain. Feng Jin said, Wenjing's words are what I mean. Jiang Pingji was dumbfounded. Her subordinate suggested to let the female soldiers be the head of the household register. What did this mean? It meant that the children born in the future must follow the female soldiers, including their surnames. She never thought that her subordinate would be so open-minded. She didn't even have the confidence to propose this. The viewers in the streaming room were so surprised that they threw away the melon in their hands and typed furiously to express their shock. Jintian jigging. Damn streamer. Go and confirm if Qiguan Rang has been transmigrated. He has such advanced thinking. Even here, if the children want to follow their mother's surname, they either discuss it with the husband and have a second child to follow their mother's surname, or the husband marries into the family and becomes a live-in son-in-law. Tudu Feichio. I feel like I'm watching a fake live stream. How could ancient men be so open-minded? Samiran Zaiwo Xia. There must be something wrong with my ears. How could Uncle Qiguan Rang say something like that? Lao Ciji Lianming. #despise. What's there to be surprised about? On the contrary, I think their thinking is very normal. They haven't broken away from the constraints of this era. First of all, they didn't see the captives as people. The captives were used to reward the female soldiers. Do you know what a reward is? They were just objects. Under such circumstances, the children born by the female soldiers followed the man's household registration. This behavior was very humiliating. In the end, were they using female soldiers to reward the captives, or were they using the captives to reward the female soldiers? The meaning of the two was completely different. Therefore, there was nothing wrong with suggesting that female soldiers should be the head of household registration. Gui Kai Guofeng Shao. Although I understand what you mean, I'm still shocked. Xingxing Big Boss Calais. Thank you for your explanation. But I have a question. What if the captive has an affair? Defeated by you? Tisk cheating? Wasn't there a crime of adultery in ancient times? The streamer also emphasized severe punishment. You should worry about whether the captive's husband will cheat and whether the female soldiers will beat him to death. You shouldn't worry about whether the wife will seek death if the husband cheats. According to their conclusion after watching the livestream for a long time in this era, killing a prostitute was not considered murder. On the contrary, once the prostitute was discovered, both men and women would have to bear great punishment, especially when the streamer deliberately increased the punishment. They believed that the female soldiers taught by the streamer were definitely not weak girls. Ahem, that's a good idea. Think about it again and come up with a regulation. Inform the female battalion in 2 days. Jiang Pingji was best at making a start and then throwing the matter to her subordinates. Feng Jin and the others secretly sighed. Sure enough, it was like that again. 3 days later, everyone in the female battalion received a draft notice. Among them were 1 or 2 girls who used to be rich. However, they were too young and could not keep their family property after their families broke up. Instead, they were sent to the brothel by their relatives. Of course, now that she knew it was not a brothel but a proper soldier, she was relieved. In addition, she knew how to read, so she was quickly promoted. In her free time, she taught the female soldiers how to read. She read the contents of the notice word by word. Everyone's mood was like sitting on a roller coaster, going up and down. Hearing that they had to be 24 years old before they could get married and that they were not allowed to get married before that, everyone's faces turned pale. At the age of 24, people of the same age could prepare to be grandmothers, but they were still old ladies who could not get married. Many of them were worried about the rest of their lives and felt very sad. However, not long after, there was a turn of events. This is true. Can we really choose a husband? Corporal, look again. Is there a mistake? How can it be so absurd? Although they said it was absurd, their pair of black grape-like eyes were sparkling. They were eager to try it out. The corporal, who could read, nodded and said, "There's no mistake. What's written on it is true." They did not have to worry about not being able to get married at the age of 24 or marrying an old man to be a stepmother. They could choose a husband from among the captives and bring him home to have a child. The child would have to take their surname. If that was the case, what would they have to worry about in the future? They were soldiers and received a monthly salary. If they saved it until they were 24 years old, it would be a considerable sum of money. They could buy a few acres of land and live comfortably as a wife. It would be wonderful. If they made great contributions in the past few years as soldiers, they might be promoted and live comfortably without farming. These were secondary. What touched them the most was that as the owner of the household register, the child would take their surname. One of the female soldiers said silently and secretly blushed. If that's the case, that's great. The contents of the notice were indeed a little shocking. But thinking about it carefully, it was all for their future. It seemed that there was nothing good about marrying early and having children. As a female soldier, there was still a long way to go. Fortunately, Xiangyang district was located in the north. These young ladies did not know about the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. With regards to this rebellious notice, other than a little fear, they were all eager to try it out. They could not wait to go to war now. If they made military contributions, their future would be miserable. Chapter 488. The effect of the notice was huge. Looking at the group of female soldiers holding their breath to train, Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. She silently adjusted the training and increased the intensity. Another 10 days passed. The snow and ice melted. The wasteland that had been cleared last year could be prepared for farming. Plowing fields, farming tools, cattle, and improved seeds have all been distributed. Xiangyang district gradually became lively. Everywhere was bustling with activity. Farmers could be seen working hard in the fields. Because the use of improved farming tools has been taught early on, it's easier now. Using the improved farming tools, the people were surprised to find that the farming efficiency was much higher than before. After plowing an acre of land, they didn't feel as tired as before. At a time when the war in the north was at loggerheads, such a flourishing scene made many people sigh with emotion. It was probably the only one in the whole north. Before the spring plowing, according to tradition, a spring plowing ceremony was held. The district magistrate was the host. Jiang Pingji did a lot of homework. She seriously memorized all the procedures. Originally, she only needed to put on a show and pose. The other steps would naturally be taken by someone else. However, she was stubborn and didn't like to fake it. She did it herself during the spring plowing ceremony. She carefully plowed an acre of land. Whether it was the depth of the plowing or other aspects, she was not inferior to the experienced farmers. The onlookers let out enthusiastic exclamations. Jiang Pingji won the applause of the crowd. My lord is still so serious and meticulous. Suku had already changed out of his formal Confucian robes. He wore a brown hemp garment. His trousers were rolled up to his knees. He looked like a farmer. Feng Jin was dressed neatly. He was the host of the spring plowing ceremony. He raised his eyebrows and asked with a smile. Why didn't I know that my lord's farming skills are so good? Chongqing followed her mother out to watch the spring plowing ceremony. She saw her father's shadow and vaguely called out, Father. She was dressed up like a lucky doll for the new year. Kokold, Father. Father. The little girl raised her little chubby finger and pointed at Feng Jin. As she shouted, saliva hung from the corner of her mouth. The clever Chongqing called him father for the first time after the New Year's banquet. After that, her speech became clearer. Wei Jingxian pursed her lips and chuckled. She carried Chongqing, who had become much heavier, and walked towards Feng Jin. When the lord was in Hejin County, he learned it from an old farmer, Suku replied. He turned his head and said, Huayu, your daughter is calling for you. Feng Jin smiled and said, Jin will go take a look. Looking at the happy family and thinking of his lovely wife who was far away in Hejin County, Suku felt a little envious. After the spring plowing ceremony, this year's spring plowing officially began, and the intensity of training suddenly increased. Sending troops to Fingyi County to deal with the Tsingyi army, there was a plan that had been made last year. Once the lord had a firm foothold in the north, he might be able to bring Xuanmei over. At that moment, Jiang Pingji climbed up from the field barefooted. Just as she was about to raise her hand to wipe her sweat, she saw a messenger running from afar. She raised her hand to wipe her sweat and accidentally got some muddy water on her face. She asked the soldier, What happened? The messenger replied, My lord, there are more than 2,000 people outside the west gate. They claim to be from Hejin County and they are my lord's trusted followers. From Hejin? Over 2,000 people? Jiang Pingji's eyes lit up and the smile on her face deepened. She didn't even have time to wash her feet before she put on a pair of wooden clogs. Lead the way. It should be Nongqin and the rest. She walked as if she was flying and shouted at Suku, who had yet to react. Xiaoyu, I'll leave the matters in the field to you. I'm going to pick someone up. Suku was stunned. What? Just as he was about to ask in detail, his lord walked quickly with her long legs. The messenger behind her had to run to catch up with her. It's indeed Nongqin. He came just in time. Jiang Pingji ordered someone to open the city gate. She had a bright smile on her face. She had seen Jiang Nongqin's progress over the years. Jiang Pingji was very assured that she would be in charge of the women's camp. Not only her, but the audience in the streaming room had not seen Jiang Nongqin for a long time. The audience in the streaming room witnessed the transformation of this ancient girl from a weak and humble girl to a powerful one. They had a feeling that their daughter had just grown up. Hearing that Jiang Nongqin had finally come north from Hejin County to meet the streamer, the audience in the streaming room began to send waves of rewards to celebrate Jiang Nongqin's return. However, they never expected that Jiang Nongqin was not the only one who came. There was also an unexpected friend. A figure pounced toward Jiang Pingji like the wind. If not for the fact that the other person's aura was not malicious, she would have captured him. Brother Lanting, one misses you so much. Jiang Pingji hurried out of the city. Shangguanwan came up to her and gave her a bear hug. She laughed brightly and her words were filled with deep longing. Why are you here? Jiang Pingji was stunned. She lifted her hands to hold Shangguanwan firmly so that she would not fall with her. Seeing this, the messenger revealed a surprised expression. Then he thought of something and immediately returned to his normal state of looking at his nose and his heart. The lord's fiancée came all the way here to pursue her husband? The messenger secretly shifted his gaze. He used his peripheral vision to observe Jiang Pingji and Shangguanwan, who refused to let go of her. Not only was the messenger shocked, but many of the audience in the streaming room were also stunned. Who was the girl in the streamer's arms? Zhu Baifeng. No, are there any ancient gods here? Tell me who this girl is. Guishu and Xiao Pudding. Hey, where did this little demon come from? Let go of my prince, where are your claws? In fact, not only was Shangguan hugging Jiang Pingji's waist, but she was also burying her head in Jiang Pingji's chest. Yiwu Yanling, #picknose. She's obviously my goddess. The person above, are you trying to snatch her from me? Tudu Feiqiu. I shook my head. It took me a while to remember who this girl is. This is a super ancient god. Let me tell you, Shangguan, a very pure and cute girl. She's the most favored noble lady of the Shangguan family. I remember that she's quite dependent on the streamer and the streamer dotes on her. The most favored noble lady of the Shangguan family? How could she behave like this? Many of the audience were confused. They had watched the streaming room for so many years and knew that brown clothing was only worn by commoners. Shangguan's clothes were brown and the material was coarse. In their memories, didn't noble ladies wear silk and satin and dress up beautifully? Their hair was full of pearls and jade and they were low-key and luxurious? No matter how he looked at it, Shangguan looked like a refugee who had escaped from a disaster. Brother Lanting, do you not welcome me? Chapter 489. She did not know what she had done to agitate Shangguan, but she hugged her waist and cried in her arms. Jiang Pingji was startled and immediately realized that something was wrong. Shangguan was indeed lively and cheerful, but it did not mean that she did not have the upbringing of an aristocratic family. Therefore, according to Shangguan, even if she was sad, she would not care about her image like she was now. Shangguan knew her gender, but outsiders did not. She hugged a man and cried in public. Wouldn't people laugh at her for being shameless? Apart from that, she followed the troops from Hejin County to Xiangyang District. That itself was very thought-provoking. No matter how mischievous Shangguan was, she would not run away from home. Jiang Pingji's face darkened. At that moment, Jiang Nongqin came forward and bowed to her respectfully. Subordinate Jiang Nongqin greets my lord. Get up. You don't have to be so courteous. Jiang Pingji frowned and asked Jiang Nongqin, left Hejin County with you? Yes, Jiang Nongqin replied. Jiang Nongqin replied. After a while, there was a tinge of indignation on her cold expression. As a woman who was once a victim, she could not bear to see such a tragedy. My lord Lady Wan, this is a long story. She did not run away from home on her own. She had no choice. If she did not leave Hejin County, I'm afraid that you would only be able to see her grave in the future. Jiang Pingji's heart sank. She comforted the crying Shangguan and said, This is not the place to talk. Let's enter the city first. Seeing that Shangguan could not control herself from crying, Jiang Pingji did not comfort her. She quietly waited for her to calm down. After a while, the clothes in her arms were gently pulled. She lowered her head and asked, You're not crying anymore? Shangguan raised her hand to wipe away the tears on her face. The front of Jiang Pingji's clothes was also wet from her tears. No, don't cry. Does not cry so much. Even when she was tortured by the Zhang family, she stubbornly refused to cry. Now that she met Jiang Pingji, her tears flowed like a spring. Shangguan only felt that countless eyes were on her. She could not care less about crying and blushed. Then don't hug me anymore. Do you want me to carry you into the city? Jiang Pingji smiled and raised her hand to rub the top of Shangguan's head. As soon as she rubbed it, she realized something was wrong. She frowned and a bold guess flashed through her mind. She deliberately maintained a calm expression and asked, Why did you cut your hair? Our bodies, hair and skin are given by our parents. According to the rules, apart from a few exceptions, one's hair could only be trimmed and not cut. Shangguan's face turned pale. She bit her lower lip and said, When her husband dies, her chastity is broken. Jiang Pingji's face darkened when she heard that. Thinking of Shangguan's attitude and her appearance in Xiangyang District, she vaguely guessed something. Let's enter the city first. Her voice sank a few notches. Jiang Nongqin followed Jiang Pingji into the district headquarters, dressed in a professional attire. After a long time, Kacha, the sound of a table shattering came from the back hall. Qiguan Rang could not help but frown. After a while his lord's suppressed anger could be heard from the back hall. Qiguan Rang was startled. Which idiot had angered his lord? Shang Guanwan felt embarrassed when she saw Jiang Pingji's anger. She spoke softly. Sister Lanting, I'm fine. Call me brother, Jiang Pingji emphasized. Shang Guanwan lowered her head and said, Oh, brother Lanting, I'm really fine. After she threw the divorce papers to the Zhangs, she gave up her womanly attire and returned to being a young girl. However, it was not easy to grow back the hair that had been lost. Even if she concealed it well, Jiang Pingji found out the problem with a touch. I really don't know where your usual intelligence went. When your stepmother forced you, you should have thought of a way to sneak out of the house and take the token I gave you to the Lu residence to ask for help. Jiang Pingji was exasperated at her failure to live up to her expectations. She raised her hand and poked her forehead. If my mother hadn't stopped you by chance, were you planning to commit suicide? If this place doesn't keep me, there will be another place for me. A tree dies when moved, but a man lives when moved. Suicide was the behavior of the weak. Jiang Pingji had always scoffed at it. Shang Guanwan's heart warmed. She lowered her head and said, At that time, I didn't think of it. Speaking of which, she had been too confident. Shang Guanwan had been pampered for many years. She had never seen her stepmother as an opponent. She believed that her family would definitely stand by her side and protect her from her stepmother's bullying. Moreover, she was already engaged at that time. As long as she was out of mourning, she would be able to marry into her husband's family. Out of sight, out of mind. She would not have to look at her stepmother's sneaky smile. However, she had not expected that one miscalculation would cause her to lose everything. Having a stepmother meant having a stepfather. The saying was true. Her stepmother was also powerful. She was gentle and considerate. She was willing to be lowly and humble. She was so humble that Shang Guanwan looked down on her. She really suspected that her stepmother was from a noble family and not a brothel. However, this attitude catered to her grandmother's and father's preferences. She slowly drew away the two most important supporters of the family. Her future mother-in-law was also instigated by her and forced to break off the engagement. Shang Guanwan, a proud daughter of the heavens, became a joke. Now that he thought about it, this stepmother was quite formidable. She was like a black widow, weaving a poisonous net and quietly waiting for the prey to fall into the net. When the prey struggled until it had no strength and was on its last breath, she would suddenly make a move, skin the prey and swallow it into her stomach. Shang Guanwan could not help but shiver when she thought about it. Jiang Pingji sighed softly and said, Forget it. At least you're safe and sound now. Shang Guanwan agreed. She held her hand with a smile and said timidly, I don't have a place to stay. Wan is currently homeless. Brother Lanting, are you willing to adopt an idler? No, Jiang Pingji said firmly. She did not wait for Shang Guanwan to feel sad. She said, Good one, come and help me. What do you think? Shang Guanwan was stunned when she heard that. The bullet screen in the streaming room was overwhelming, denouncing Jiang Pingji. Tumi Dalao, what the F***? Can you be more shameless? Can you be more shameless? Can you be more shameless? Xing Dalao. Hello everyone. I'm the host's face. She doesn't want me anymore. I feel so bad. Fengzi Dalao. Shangguan, little lowly, you've just escaped the tiger's den and stepped into the wolf's den. The audience in the streaming room felt sorry for Shangguan, but due to the distance, they could only watch as the little rabbit jumped into Jiang Pingji's trap. They could imagine that when the little girl jumped into the trap, Jiang Pingji would happily bury her. She was sold by the host and she was counting the money for the host. Shangguan blinked. She did not understand what Jiang Pingji meant. How can I help Brother Lanting? Jiang Pingji ignored the bullet screen. I plan to build a school and take in children of suitable age. I don't expect them to be knowledgeable, but they need to be literate and able to do arithmetic. You can be a teacher and help teach them for a while. What do you think? Top talents were hard to come by, but basic talents could be cultivated by oneself. They could be put to use after 2 or 3 years. Chapter 490. Shangguan blushed and said softly, How can I be a teacher with my limited knowledge? Jiang Pingji said, My is extremely intelligent. I'm sure you'll be able to teach her simple knowledge. But she glanced at Jiang Nongqin, who was sitting at the side, and said softly, I prefer to be like you. Along the way to the north, Shang Guanwan had seen too many things that she had never come into contact with before. The more it was like this, the more she wanted to protect herself. Jiang Pingji could understand her thoughts and did not force her. It's not wrong for you to do so, but your martial arts skills are not up to par. If you go to the battlefield, it'll be extremely dangerous. How about this, you teach at the school for a period of time, and I'll arrange a martial arts master for you. When you've graduated from him, you'll be allowed to go to the battlefield. Shang Guanwan thought about it and agreed with a smile. Jiang Pingji secretly frowned and thought to herself, I'll ask Li Yun to be stricter when the time comes. If her martial arts skills did not reach a certain level, she would not be released. What was the battlefield? She would lose her life if she was not careful. Shang Guanwan still needed time to grow. After catching up, Shang Guanwan could not help but think of the streets and houses she saw along the way. She thought about it and sighed. I followed the troops all the way from Hejian to Xiangyang, so I know how chaotic the situation in the north is. Under such circumstances, the people under your rule can still live and work in peace and contentment. And the spring plowing scene is extraordinarily lively. Sigh, the people of Xiangyang are blessed to have such a good official like Brother Lanting. Jiang Pingji did not know whether to laugh or cry. You're flattering me. My bones are going to turn soft from your flattery. She instructed the small kitchen of the district headquarters to prepare a meal for Shang Guanwan and Jiang Nongqin. The two of them did not eat anything good along the way. Usually they barely managed to make do with a meal of cold and hard rations mixed with boiled snow water. Now that they smelled the tempting aroma of the delicacies, they did not care about their image and ate to their heart's content. Jiang Pingji went to the government office and asked someone to call Li Yun over. I've taken you in as a disciple, she said. Li Yun was stunned and quickly shook his head. I'm not good at martial arts, how can I be a teacher? Jiang Pingji said, I'm not asking you to take up the post now. We'll talk about it after we've conquered Fengyi County. Now you just have to prepare for the battle with peace of mind. Once the preparations are complete, we can go to war. As for Warner, she is a good student who is eager to learn. You can just go to the school occasionally to give her some pointers. I forgot to tell you that I gave Warner the task of being the teacher of the academy. School? Li Yun couldn't react in time. Jiguan Rang was stunned as well. Since when did Xiangyang district torment the school? Jiang Pingji crossed her arms in front of her chest and added, The academy was a last-minute decision I made. I didn't have time to discuss it with you. To be precise, she had only decided to start building a school when Shang Guanwan appeared. Jiguan Rang and Li Yun were speechless. It was tiring to be a subordinate with such a master who could do whatever she wanted. Jiguan Rang knew that Jiang Pingji often stirred up trouble, but he also knew that she was not a careless person. Every move she made was carefully considered. He asked in surprise, Why does my lord want to build a school? Jiang Pingji turned her head and asked, Don't you think we have too few people we can use? Li Yun scratched his head and asked honestly, But can't we recruit people? It's not easy to build a school, right? Jiang Pingji secretly rolled her eyes. Other matters could be delayed, but the school was related to the long-term development of the future. How can the people we recruit be as loyal and reliable as the people we nurture? I, your lord, am alone and powerless now. I may not even be interested in the truly virtuous talents. Jiang Pingji laughed and said, Do you know how Xiangyang district was built to its current state? Ask Wen Zheng and the rest and you'll know how tired it was before the new year. If we can nurture a batch of useful people, we can save a lot of effort. Talents, no matter when it was, could never be too much. Jiang Pingji said again, They don't have to learn well, nor do we need them to be knowledgeable. It's fine as long as they can read and do accounting. When there were enough basic talents, she planned to start nurturing elite talents. The former was time-consuming and had quick results. The latter took a long time, but it was beneficial for future development. She understood that the prosperity of a country could not do without a large number of basic talents. What's more, there was a lack of elite talents to be the brains. It was just that it was too early to think about this. She planned to take it one step at a time. Jiguan Rang immediately figured out the crux of the matter. Indeed, they did not lack top-notch talents now. They only lacked useful basic talents. Only when the foundation was solid could they build a higher building. But, if they were to build a school, there would definitely be more than one room. The scale should be larger than ordinary private schools. How much would they need to invest? Suddenly, Qiguan Rang felt sorry for the poor Su Ku. If his lord really built a school, Su Ku had to make a budget. Li Yun asked, "Then my lord, when will the school be built?" Jiang Pingji thought about it and said, "After we conquer Fengyi County." Some spies went there to investigate the situation. The Tsingyi army really do not know how to manage. They are as stupid as pigs. Not to mention that half of the population of such a large county has been lost. It is so desolate and barren that it can't even compare to a small county. To restore it to its former state, it will take at least half a year, at most a year. When Fengyi County is stabilized, we will be considered to have a firm foothold. Her current official position was only that of a district magistrate. Logically speaking, she needed the permission of the Dongqing royal family. But it did not matter. Whoever had the bigger fist had the right to speak. The district magistrate of Fengyi County could curry favor with the Tsingyi army. Naturally, he would listen to her obediently. When Feng Jin and the rest returned, Jiang Pingji specially held a barbecue party. When everyone realized that there were 2 more women at the table, they could not help but be stunned. What the hell was this? Feng Jin looked at one of them and felt that she was vaguely familiar. It was as if he had seen her somewhere before. This is Jiang Nongqin. From now on she will be in charge of everything in the women's camp, Jiang Pingji said. Luo Yue and Li Yun were stunned. Then their gazes fell on Jiang Nongqin at the same time. They thought to themselves, is this maiden Jiang? Including the female troops that Jiang Nongqin brought, the number of women's camp had already exceeded 1,200 people. With the addition of some people, they could barely be considered as a battalion and could be treated as an independent combat unit. According to the current rules, the commander of such a scale could be called a general or a captain. Their lord actually appointed a woman as a general. On the other hand, Meng Hun congratulated Jiang Nongqin. She replied with a smile, "From now on, please give me more pointers, coach." Meng Hun smiled and said, "I don't dare to give you pointers. Maiden, you can also take charge on your own now." Jiang Nongqin was quiet by nature. She did things in a low-key manner. Her style was down to earth. Meng Hun was very satisfied with working with her in the past. He had a very good impression of her. Jiang Pingji's gaze fell on Shangguan Wan. She said, "This is Shangguan Wan. Before the school is built, she will be in charge of the women's department in the government office." The women's department in the government office referred to the more than 20 maidens who were subordinates in the government office. The matters they dealt with were not considered major, but the details were very complicated. They helped Su Ku and the rest to share a lot of labor. Shangguan Wan. Chapter 491. Sensing that someone was looking at her, Shangguan Wan looked over and realized that it was a handsome young Lang Jun. Li Yun secretly nodded his head, expressing his satisfaction. Such vigilance was not bad. Shangguan Wan was secretly puzzled. Shangguan Wan and Jiang Nongqin had already eaten a little. Initially they thought that they should not eat too much, but when the roast meat was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside was dipped in various spices, the aroma of the food tempted their taste buds. Their mouths kept salivating. Actually, they were not that full. Thinking of this, they did not care about being reserved anymore. They roasted and ate when they wanted to. Brother Lanting. No, I'm calling you Lord now. These days are so comfortable. Shangguan Wan's diet had always been a combination of meat and vegetables. She rarely only ate meat like she did now. She thought that she would get sick of the taste after eating a few more mouthfuls, but after eating 2 plates of sliced meat with those strange sauces, she could have eaten more if her stomach was not big enough. Eat your roast meat. So much can't stop your mouth. Jiang Pingji carefully flipped the meat slices on the roast plate. She raised her eyebrows slightly and her cold voice carried some affection. Shangguan Wan sighed and said, "It's not worth it to grow up." Jiang Pingji glanced at her from the corner of her eyes and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Shangguan Wan said, "If I was still the same age, my lord would not have complained that I ate too much. I'm afraid you would have coaxed me to eat more." Jiang Pingji sighed and used clean chopsticks to add half a plate of meat. She said helplessly, "My kindness was treated as ill intent. It's not good to eat too much meat, lest it accumulates in the stomach and becomes difficult to digest. You, on the other hand, misunderstood that my heart ached for the roast meat. You're really heartless. Here, I've roasted it for you." Looking at the interaction between Shangguan and Jiang Pingji, Qiguan Rang raised his eyebrows slightly and exchanged glances with Su Ku. They looked like they were watching a good show. Lovers. It's good to be young. Qiguan Rang lowered his voice and teased. Su Ku responded with an expression that said, we both know. Logically speaking, his lord was already 16 years old this year. However, other than his first fiancée, the current Madame Feng Jin Wei Jingxian, he had never heard of his lord having any other female confidants. Their lord was still young, so they were not very anxious. Moreover, their lord was so protective of the fairer sex. Why would he worry about not being popular with women? On this matter, the two of them had the same idea. A man should first establish his career, and there was no hurry to get married. Speaking of marriage, Su Ku and Qiguan Rang were secretly worried about the relationship between Feng Jin and their lord. Feng Jin was the current husband of the lord's ex-fiancée. Was it really okay for the two of them to be together? The facts proved that Feng Jin was truly a benevolent gentleman. He was open-minded and did not care about those rumors. Even at last year's New Year's banquet, he was generous enough to bring his wife and children along. Now that Shangguan, who had a close relationship with their lord, had appeared, they felt that something good might be around the corner. In fact, when Qiguan Rang was sighing with emotion, Wei Xi's hand that was holding the cup trembled and the wine spilled out. Feng Jin looked even more conflicted. It was really difficult. He guarded a secret that only a few people knew about and watched as his teammates let their imaginations run wild, but he could not explain it. Let them speculate. It won't come true anyway. Wei Xi took out a greenish-gray handkerchief and calmly wiped the wine on his hand. If his lord was attentive to a man, he could gossip, but he was not worried about Shangguan. When Feng Jin heard Wei Xi's words, his lips curled into a smile. I think so too. The two of them looked at each other with tacit understanding and raised their cups to drink. Wei Xi's body was still weak, so the wine he drank was nourishing medicinal wine. After being unanimously approved by several physicians, it could slowly drive away the cold. Jingxian is also in Xiangyang. Chongqing, who was born last year, can talk and walk now. Do you want to go and take a look? Shangguan's eyes lit up when she heard that. Of course I have to go. I haven't seen Sister Jingxian for a long time. When they saw Wei Jingxian, the two of them naturally sighed and talked to each other about their encounters over the years. When she learned that Shangguan finally got rid of Madame Zhang, Wei Jingxian could not help but feel happy for her. In the previous letter, Shangguan told Wei Jingxian that she was going to marry a dead man. The man's betrothal gift also came with a copy of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Her future mother-in-law even humiliated her in public, asking Shangguan to study the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and curb her dirty habits before marriage. At that time, Wei Jingxian felt extremely angry. She was the legitimate daughter of the Shangguan family and was born into a noble aristocratic family. How could she tolerate being humiliated and belittled by such a shrew? However, every family had their own difficulties. At that time, Wei Jingxian was still with Feng Jin as a hostage in Shangjing and could not even protect herself. The only thing she could do was to comfort Shangguan. She could not really help her. Wei Jingxian hugged Chongqing. It's all right now. I don't have to worry anymore. Shangguan sighed. Yes, she used to be Shangguan of the Shangguan family. Now Shangguan is just Shangguan. Aunt. Recently Chongqing liked to remember people. Whenever she caught one, she would repeat it over and over again. Shangguan looked at Chongqing and could not help but have a bold idea. Is Sister Jingxian taking care of little Chongqing at home now? Wei Jingxian was stunned. Yes, Chongqing is still young and doesn't like to stick to wet nurses or maids. Chongqing was young and had a bad temper. The servants really could not control her, so she could only raise her by her side. Sister Jingxian, have you ever thought of finding a job? Wei Jingxian was stumped by the question. She looked at Shangguan in confusion. Why are you suddenly asking this? Shangguan could not tell why. She just felt that Wei Jingxian was also familiar with the classics and historical collections in her boudoir and knew the morals of saints. In terms of talent, she was not as talented as someone like Feng Jin, but she was much better than those illiterate fools. It was just that it was too much of a waste to be trapped in a small inner courtyard. Because of her own experience, Shangguan always lacked a sense of security. In the past she felt that it was enough for a noble lady of an aristocratic family to fulfill her responsibilities. Now she felt that such a life was a little dangerous. She deliberated for a while and told her the truth. Wei Jingxian did not show an angry expression. Instead she seemed to be thinking about it. Wei Jingxian sighed. Everyone has their own way of living. Chongqing is still young. I can't stop worrying about her. At night, before the couple went to bed, Wei Jingxian told Feng Jin about this. Feng Jin was about to take off his clothes, but he stopped halfway and said, "When Chongqing is a little older, you can give it a try." Wei Jingxian was surprised. It was as if she did not know her husband. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.